Check 1, 2, check, check.
Audio test 1 for the meeting stream. Audio test 2 for the meeting stream. Could the interpretation team please do an audio test on the French interpretation channel? That's good, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. This is the 1 minute warning to the start of the Transportation Committee meeting. All right. All right. Good morning, everybody, on this wonderful snowy Thursday morning. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for everyone making their way down here, and for our online viewers, thank you for participating today as well. First of all, we're on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Nation. And at this point, before we proceed, we do have to do a quick roll call to make sure we have seven members present to maintain quorum. Mr. Coordinator.
Councillor Luloff. Present. Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor DeRush.
Present.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
And Vice Chair Kitts.
Here.
You have full quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that. So first of all, we have no regrets, declarations of interest, seeing none, confirmation of minutes, minutes 31, Wednesday, the 29th of June, 2022. Are those confirmed? Thank you very much. So I'm just going through the agenda items that are here. Item 4.1, Transportation Committee Terms of Reference. I believe Councillor Johnson actually does have a quick question on this, so we'll hold this item. Did you just want to ask your question right now, unless other members of council wish to hold this item and we put it back on the agenda? Great. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. So I was just, I had some questions with respect to paragraph 6. But I also just had a general understanding. So since we're passing a new transportation master plan this year, and because this document makes so many references to the transportation master plan, it's the assumption then that we don't revisit the terms of reference at that time, that we adopt the priorities that are set in the new transportation plan as given, as written in the terms of reference. Yes.
Mr. Chair, Caitlin Salter McDonald from Clerk's Office. There would be the opportunity upon adoption of the transportation master plan to further refine the terms of reference to better align with the plan that this council adopts. And conversely, the terms of reference set the general mandate of the committee. They do not bind what would be adopted in the upcoming transportation master plan.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I think it will be interesting to have that conversation at that time, Chair, just to see whether or not it is something that needs to be revisited, but at your discretion at that time. And so with respect to paragraph 6, there's just language in here that I was just curious of just unpacking because of my excitement to be on the committee. I know that we are talking about the priorities identified in the master plan. I assume that means perhaps the key themes. I struggled to find the connection perfectly with language. Maybe it's just in general understanding of what the priorities or what the intentions of the transportation master plan are, as opposed to a direct reference. I think that alignment could be interesting when we put forward the true master plan to make sure that the terms of reference are clear, so that it's a direct relationship as opposed to just a general intention. So that being said, I really appreciate the key themes for the 2013 update, but within section 6, we've got a few identified priorities that are in general terms. So we've got the objective of encouraging the desired modal splits, mitigating unacceptable congestion, minimizing neighborhood traffic infiltration and air pollution. I wonder if there is something around safety that could be considered as part of a priority. It might be something that is covered off by the Road Safety Action Plan in some specific ways. But if we are talking about general priorities, I would suggest that we might consider safety. I know that that is a priority of the new Transportation Master Plan. So, Chair, with your permission, I'd be interested in having a more explicit reference to safety.
Mr. Chair, it's Vivi Chi here, so perhaps I can answer that question about the TMP. The TMP, as part of this mandate of the committee, will cover all of that. But your question is very specific about the TMP policies and our priorities and how everything is linked to the official plan, climate change, road safety action plan, so on. That's all part of the TMP update, and we will be bringing that to committee later this spring. So that you can see there are two parts, one on the policies and the go forward plan, and the part 2 will be subsequent to that, and that would set out the project priorities. So I don't think this, your comments are all pertaining to the TMP update, and it does not affect the mandate of this committee.
And just to add to Vivi's comments, I think, there's still a lot of people new to Transportation Committee. There would probably be a good opportunity to sit down with our staff and talk about the Road Safety Action Plan specifically. I know that's what is near and dear to your heart. So certainly, I'm not sure if Vivi's response satisfies you.
Yeah, I think generally, we will have an opportunity with the new Transportation Master Plan to bring in some of the, because my ward, and I don't mean to belabor the point, but because my ward is an outer urban ward, we were designed in this interesting middle stage where we were designed for cars. New suburbs have an opportunity to be based on current transportation policy and best practices. So they have, narrow roads or wider turns or things like that considered in their design. But for the in-betweeners, I actually think we do have an opportunity to be thinking about how, and it's going to be a challenge to apply some of the new road design strategies in some of these neighborhoods. And so a more explicit commitment to safety within these terms of reference would give me the confidence that we're going to be able to have those kinds of discussions. I know it will come through with the Transportation Master Plan, but since we have these other priorities listed, I thought it might be appropriate to list that one as well as a highlight.
Great. And maybe this is something after we pass this here today, between now and council, if there's some verbiage that you feel is necessary, we can work with staff. Vivi, was appropriate?
Sure. Yep.
Great. So again, there's no presentations, no discussions. Is this item carried? Great. We have information previously distributed. Wellington Street temporary road closures. We do not have a staff presentation. We do have 10 registered delegations for correspondence. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Kitts to introduce the motion to lift this item onto the agenda. Vice Chair Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. That pursuant to subsection 89.3 of the procedure bylaw, being bylaw number 2022-410, the Transportation Committee approved that the rules of procedure be suspended to allow for the consideration of the item listed as IPDA, Wellington Street Temporary Road Closure.
Is this item carried?
Carried.
Great, thank you. And for the actual motion itself, I want to thank members of committee and others that unfortunately, it was very last minute. We're working very closely with the ward council, with staff, trying to come up with the appropriate wording for something, because I think at the end of the day, we all want to get to the same place. And just by way of background, or when it comes to the IPD, just for a history lesson, we made a commitment to keep the road closed to the end of 2022. That has now expired. And we find ourselves in a new situation where, you know, again, we want to see something happen with that road. So at this point, I'm going to get Vice Chair Kitts to read the motion. We'll go to delegations. Of course, if you have questions for delegations, feel free. And then we'll go to staff, because I know many of committee members do have questions for staff. So Vice Chair Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. I'll get it up on the screen. Whereas on February 23rd, 2022, Council approved a motion to temporarily close Wellington Street between Bank Street and Elgin Street until the end of 2022, and that the road not reopen until such a time that a report is brought forward to Transportation Committee. And whereas the IPD sent to Council on January 17th, 2023, indicated that staff will bring forward a report to Transportation Committee once the traffic study that is set to begin shortly has been completed. And whereas Traffic Services conducted a review of traffic impacts due to the closure and concluded that the current closure is manageable based on 2022 traffic volumes, however, have observed some impacts of detoured traffic on the road network in the area. And whereas the return to the office of federal government employees will lead to increased pedestrian cycling and traffic volumes in the downtown core, and along with planned major construction projects in the area, will lead to increased congestion. And whereas the city has received requests from residents, businesses, and visitors to reopen Wellington Street, and whereas the increased congestion and impacts of detoured traffic can increase the number of potential risks to pedestrians and cyclists, and whereas opening Wellington Street will provide additional capacity for vehicles traveling in the downtown core, thereby reducing the impact of the return to work of federal employees and planned lane reductions as a result of construction in the area. And whereas staff can currently, in consultation with Ottawa Police Services, Ottawa Fire Services, and Ottawa Paramedic Services, choose to temporarily close Wellington Street and other city streets for special events, security reasons, or to allow for lawful protests. Therefore, be it resolved that in consultation with Ottawa Police Services, Ottawa Fire Services, and Ottawa Paramedic Services, Wellington Street between Elgin and Bank Street be reopened to all traffic as soon as it is operationally feasible, as determined by the Director of Traffic Services, but no sooner than March 1st, 2023, to allow for the replacement and installation of traffic infrastructure in the area. And be it further resolved that staff explore options for temporary road closures of Wellington Street between Elgin Street and Bank Street during the summer of 2023 for special events and community programming, or for the safety and well-being of the residents of Ottawa. And be it further resolved that the general managers of planning, real estate, and economic development, public works continue ongoing discussions with federal officials regarding the potential of a redefined parliamentary precinct with appropriate consultation with local businesses and residents. And be it further resolved that staff ensure that appropriate easements, city infrastructure, future transportation plans, land valuation process, impact of any changes to bus routes on the capacity of downtown streets, including access and entrances to O-train stations, and any potential land exchange are considered in all discussions with federal officials. And be it further resolved that staff continue to work with Public Service and Procurement Canada on finalizing a traffic study and report back to Transportation Committee and Council in the first quarter of 2024, or as soon as the study is complete, including an update on ongoing discussions, recommendations, and any requests resulting from the negotiation framework. And be it further resolved, staff regularly liaise with the mayor's office and the local councillor to identify opportunities to increase programming and seek out partnerships to improve the beautification and animation of Wellington Street. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for reading that, Vice Chair. My voice couldn't do it today, so I really appreciate that. We're going to go directly to delegations. So the first delegate is Derek Simpson. I'm unsure if Derek is in the. Thank you very much, sir. If you wish to come up to the microphone. Great, Mr. Simpson. I'm not sure if this is your first time here, but you do have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Centertown Community Association because the City of Ottawa has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to prove its commitment to climate change, its commitment to the business and tourist community, and most importantly, to prove its commitment to the residents of our great city. We have the opportunity to better serve families with a safe pedestrian-first space. We have the opportunity to better serve businesses with ample foot traffic and a guarantee that their businesses will not be held hostage. And we have the opportunity to better serve visitors with a destination that showcases the beauty of our wonderful city and country. We need a long-term plan to reimagine and revitalize Wellington Street for pedestrians, cyclists, and transit riders. But big plans, like trams, take time. And until then, we cannot let Wellington Street lie empty and idle. Temporary improvements are needed, like greenery and planters, vendors and food stands, and public art from local and Indigenous artists. We need to ensure the area is accessible for emergency vehicles. Our ward has the second highest number of seniors in Ottawa who need to feel safe, knowing that when they call the fire department or an ambulance, that it will show up on time. Local businesses need to be able to get deliveries. With the recent closure of many businesses in the area, locals have lost what they need to live within a 15-minute neighborhood. Making deliveries more difficult will not solve that problem. We would also like an updated traffic study that accounts for intensification in the area. In the long term, to ensure the success of Wellington and the surrounding area, we need to make sure that our transit, especially the LRT, is safe and dependable for riders. We suggest that parking fees be increased in the downtown core. This would encourage alternatives to driving, improve air quality, and ensure our city is valuing and pricing its land accurately. The convoy took something from us, but this is our opportunity to turn a dark time for our city into something beautiful. On Wellington, the short-term plan must match the long-term vision. We can continue the status quo in Ottawa and bring cars back on our most historic street, or we can work towards something truly special. Thank you.
Terrific delegation. Thank you for that. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the presentation, and I think it captures a lot of the complexity that's been in my inbox for the last few weeks. I will say that this is an issue on which residents in Somerset Ward, where Wellington Street exists, there's certainly some division, but I'm also seeing a growing desire for more places for people in the city. My question to you is, do you think a compromise would be possible? I know that some cities, for example, have bollards that go up and down on certain days of the week. Have you heard from residents about particular times of the day or days of the week where they do feel that the traffic circulation needs to happen? You did mention the seniors and the businesses who need deliveries.
Yeah, so we've heard some residents recommend maybe opening in the summer and closing in the winter. And we've had some saying weekends or evenings. But the big things we heard were emergency vehicles. So people really would like the opportunity for emergency vehicles to get through if needed, and deliveries.
Great, that really matches what I've heard. And I think it also, Chair Tierney did mention that I did a lot of work with the mayor's office and with Chair Tierney to try to find some language to have us put some resources into a summer pilot that actually helps show us the potential for Wellington Street. So even if this committee does vote to reopen, that we can anticipate a summer closure very similar to what we see on the Queen Elizabeth driveway, with actual resources attached to it instead of simply barricades. I'm just wondering, has the Centertown Community Association put in any thought into design elements or particular animation that you think would be really helpful on Wellington, that would be helpful to that part of the neighborhood?
One thing we've really noticed is the lack of green space in downtown, and especially in that area. So definitely green space, street trees, planters, those are things we would really appreciate.
Thank you very much. I will have to spout the statistic that Somerset Ward has the lowest number of trees in the city, 22%. And in order to combat climate change, the experts say we need 30 to 40%. So I agree with you about the greenery. Thank you so much for your delegation. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And just before you leave, we do have 2 more questions from councillors. But I will acknowledge Mayor Sutcliffe is in the room actually as well. And thank you for your hard work in helping craft a lot of this language with the local area councillor, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you for your time today. So I represent College Ward, which is a outer urban ward, and our residents were not as directly affected by the convoy. And I think that I would really like to understand better what implications there might be with respect to that, because some of the, in what we've been hearing, it's like, well, it was a year ago now, and we need to look forward and we need to look to the future. And I just want to know from a community perspective how a reopening or a continued closure would influence your experience of safety downtown with respect to the convoy, or has healing started and this could be actually considered a separate action?
I think if you look towards the federal government, who are kind of the experts in safety in the parliamentary precinct, they are recommending that they take over it and that it remain pedestrian first. And I think that would make it much easier for vehicles to not enter the area.
Are you finished, Councillor? Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Devine. Great. I want to thank you for your delegation today. Our next delegation is the Honorable Senator Andrew Cardzo. Is the Senator here today or online? And I'm looking to our controllers of the master powers online here to check to see if the Senator is there.
Yeah, he's just being promoted to a panelist, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Senator. We don't see you. You can
okay.
turn your camera on if you wish. Up there we go. We can see you now. So welcome to the committee. Just for your information, you have 5 minutes as a delegation and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Good morning, and thank you sincerely for this opportunity to appear before you on this important issue, the future of Wellington Street. My name is Andrew Cardozo. I'm a senator representing Ontario and have been a resident of Ottawa for some 40 years. I've had the good fortune of being involved in various community groups, including Big Brothers of Ottawa, YMYWCA, and the Catholic Centre for Immigrants. And I've taught, and I'm a graduate and have taught at Carleton University. I've been addressing the issues about Ottawa for many years, including in my previous role as the head of the Pearson Centre. Today, interestingly, I speak to you both as a resident of Ottawa and as a senator, and coincidentally, my office is now located on Wellington Street at O'Connor. Now, I recognize that this issue before you is not a simple one. I personally don't see that this is an issue of opening or closing the street. Rather, it is whether the street should be kept open for vehicles or for people and pedestrians. I think we can all agree that the status quo, the bare, ugly, barricaded street, is not an option. I urge you to go with the people option, and I urge you to act quickly and get it moving and do it permanently. My concern is if you do something, if you allow the traffic back in temporarily, we're just never going to get there. I've been putting these ideas forward, which I think are fairly simple. And I think really this is a once in a generation opportunity to enhance this important street and the national capital with an inspiring and inviting vision. I would suggest to you that this is the single most important street in our country, as Canadians from every region have a stake in the Parliament buildings and have a stake in what the whole venue looks like. I also urge you to think about Ottawa as a destination, as a place that all Canadians can look to with pride, and that the world looks to as reflective of who we are as a country. So I would suggest to you that about Wellington Street, about the future of Wellington Street, there are kind of 5 criteria, 5 components that you and we all as a city have to consider. Number 1, transportation and traffic, which is your prime responsibility of this committee. Number 2, pride in our nation's capital. Number 3, enhancing a tourist destination. Number 4, safety and security for political leaders, our political institutions, and the visiting public. And number 5, the space for Canadians to gather to demonstrate for or against issues that are important to them. So with regards to traffic, I think traffic patterns have been changing in recent years, with the LRT reducing to some extent the traffic in the downtown core. And in the months ahead, we will have a maximum of 50% of the public servants returning to work in the downtown core. Now, a downtown core will have some level of congestion. So I suppose the challenge ahead is to find the compromise that will do best both for traffic patterns and making Wellington Street a space we can all be proud of as a nationally important destination. If you agree with the people option, rather than the vehicle option, I will suggest to you that there are 3 simple stages that can literally begin tomorrow. Begin with some Winterlude flair being brought onto Wellington Street, using some of the wooden kiosks that were part of the winter market at the very successful winter market at Lansdowne. You can bring some of them to parts of Wellington Street. There can be organized hockey games on weekends, and perhaps some ice and snow sculptures, along with a few food trucks, for example, down at the Wellington and Bank area, and include, of course, the quintessential beaver tails. The second phase would be through the spring. That focus would be bringing in benches, planters, Adirondack chairs, street art, sculptures, and then include events connected to the Tulip Festival and Canada Day. Let's give this area a name, such as Constitution Place, Place de la Constitution, and have some displays that highlight the key aspects of this foundational document of our country. Then the third phase would be after July the 1st and through the end of the year, or even into the next year, which would focus on some structural changes to the area from July moving on, removing the asphalt and truly changing the layout of the area so that it looks and feels like a people place and not a street that has been closed down. In closing, over the coming weeks and months, you can gradually make it a pleasant, attractive tourist destination that can do our capital and our country proud. It's time for us to dream proud and dream big for this very important symbol of our democracy and of our country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Well stated. We do have 2 questions from councillors. First, Councillor DesRoches, and then Councillor Troster.
Thank you. First of all, Senator, merci for your participation today. I think it's the first time in my recollection that we've had a parliamentarian from the Senate come as a delegation. So I welcome you.
Thank you.
I accept on some levels, and I think the constituents of my suburban ward accept that they have some role in helping shape the nation's capital and making it truly a place that all Canadians can be proud of. But I think it has its limits. And I think the role really truly belongs in a big way to the National Capital Commission, which at times is a helper and that sometimes is less helpful, I think, in terms of some of the urban planning decisions that we make. And we can agree to disagree on some of those things. But at the end of the day, I think the NCC does overall good work. And we need strong advocates on Parliament Hill to ensure that that organization is properly funding and that the money is going to truly beautify this city. I think we saw from time to time parliamentarians who are really just disinterested in the nation's capital. Again, I'm really thrilled to see your interest and wonder if you'd be willing to be an advocate for this city and for funding for the NCC so that we can do some of the things that potentially you're talking about. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments, your kind comments, Councillor, and for your question. I am really a passionate Ottawan and a passionate a national capital person, and you can count on me as your ally on these issues. I sit, and maybe I'll just add that I sit as an independent senator. As you may know, for the last 7 years or so, all senators have been appointed as independents, so we don't sit as a party. But it still allows me, I hope, to use my office usefully. And if there's anything I can do to bring various parties together, such as the NCC, the government, and the City of Ottawa, in any small way, I'm more than happy to do that. Count on me as your ally, and certainly as a fierce promoter and a defender of Ottawa and the national capital. So I look forward to appearing before you again. And by the way, if any of you have not visited the new Senate building, which is called the temporary Senate building, but will likely take 10 or 15 years, I will be pleased to give you individual or a joint tour of the building. It's really quite an interesting building because of the history it has from having been a train station and now being the Senate. So please call on me anytime.
Thanks, Senator. Last question is the public inquiry that's underway with respect to the emergency declaration. Be interested in your views, what you see as possible outcome for that would help shape our decisions here down the road in terms of strengthening the security of the Capitol and the lessons learned from that experience. I think there's a parliamentary committee that's underway, but I fear that will be so partisan that the recommendations will be subject to question, whereas this independent review, I think, hopefully will shed some light. So just briefly, if you could give some insights in terms of what you think we can learn from that inquiry that's been looking at the situation.
Yeah, I think I would try not to opine on the controversial issues around that, which will be really interesting and political. But two thoughts. One is, I really want us to do something about this space and Wellington for the right reasons and for the good reasons, not because we're scared about a lot of trucks coming and taking over the street. So the second part of my thought is the silver lining of that whole process is it has given us this opportunity to really think hard about the future of Wellington Street. And I really want to approach it from a positive perspective, that is the future of the Capitol, highlighting our democracy, highlighting the seat of our democracy, making it a people place, making it environmentally friendly, and all those reasons. But I think there will be some issues around safety and security. And I'm in an interesting position to watch that, because as a very new senator, having been appointed just 2 months ago, I know that my security personally is not threatened at this point, but I also see my colleagues and know that for some of them, often who've taken strong positions that may be seen as controversial, their safety is affected, as are yours as city councillors. And indeed, there are some of your colleagues who decided not to run in the last election because of the effects of the convoy and the way, in fact, the negativity in politics is chasing some good people out of politics. So there's a lot of other issues that I think we can learn from. But I just want to say the main thing I hope we approach this is from a positive perspective of improving the Capitol.
Thanks, Senator. That's all, Chair.
Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here. I really do appreciate it. And I think a lot of your comments speak to many of the views that I've been hearing in the community. But something I did want to highlight is this whole idea of festival programming or recreational activities spilling out onto Wellington. I know that Kevin from the Spark Street Business Improvement Association is here today, and having met with those folks quite recently, one of the challenges is that, they're already using very limited resources to animate other parts of the city. There is a huge cost. And as Councillor DesRoches just so helpfully pointed out, the problem, of course, is with a shared jurisdiction like this, the conversations can be very slow. So my question to you is, do you have any suggestions of how we might be able to expedite conversations with federal partners? And you mentioned that you're an independent. I think this is, I've personally already been lobbied by 2 MPs, but they are from the same party. I'm very interested in suggestions you might have about how we might form a municipal federal table to discuss this and do it quickly, because things often don't happen quickly when we negotiate with the federal government. Thank you.
Can I invite you a representative, any other representative of the city, a representative from the NCC and from the federal government to have a sandwich with me on Monday at noon. We can meet outside my office on Wellington at O'Connor and have a discussion. I don't mean that jokingly. I mean, maybe Monday is too soon, but
Sure. I would love to have a sandwich with you, Senator, but I do appreciate that.
but I just, because I'm in this kind of nefarious role of being a senator, in that I'm not part of the government and not part of the city, I think I may have a role that I can pull people together, and in as much as I'm not part of the parties that are there. I'd be happy to discuss this further with you, Councillor, and see if there's any way we can get a few people together to have those discussions. And if there's anything I can use my office to advance that, I'd be more than willing to.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the representative from the Centertown Community Association. Do you think there's a compromise position here? And if so, what might that look like?
My thought is if there's a compromise, it isn't what I'm looking at. Or I mean, the idea of having an open space, and in a sense, it's part of this idea is extending the lawn of the Parliament buildings over to Wellington Street, which doesn't leave you a lot of space for anything other than, say, emergency vehicles. The other point I just want to make is the Parliament buildings, as you know, are undergoing renovation for the next 10 to 15 years. My concern is that if we don't do something nice and enticing and inviting with that street, the area becomes a bit of a white elephant, because Center Block it will have a cladding over it. It's called a trempleur, which is a beautiful canvas, which is going to make it look just like the Parliament buildings to a large extent, but it is empty. And so we run the risk of that area becoming a bit of a white elephant unless we really think hard about how we bring people to the street. I wonder if there may be a compromise also for Spark Street to put a small amount of traffic down that street, perhaps just vehicles or just vehicles for people with disabilities, taxis and Ubers and that kind of thing, and allow some traffic to take some of the traffic off the other streets. I wonder if there are other compromises that can be done there as well.
Okay, well, I will certainly, I'm sure we'll hear from Kevin soon from the Spark Street Business Improvement Association that'll have some thoughts about that. I really appreciate that. And somebody suggested to me too, there might be an opportunity to pilot micro mobility in terms of deliveries, smaller vehicles or more environment, cargo bikes or other things of that nature. But as I said, these things don't happen quickly. They are expensive. I personally adore the bollards that go up and down near the US Embassy. Those are also not cheap. But anyway, I really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor.
And thank you for taking time to be here at our committee today, Senator. I don't see any further questions, so I'll cut you loose. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Unfortunately, Brenda Knight, which is our next delegation, is unable to be here, but there was a submission. The document is in your SharePoint drive for review. Our next delegation is Stephen McDonald, and I believe Stephen is in the waiting room. So we'll just give that a minute to pull him in as a panelist. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning. Bon matin. Thank you very much for, I guess I have the 5 minutes. I'll see the clock there.
Great.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm here today as a private citizen who is not a resident of Somerset Ward, but whose parents moved to Ottawa in 2020, right into the heart of the red zone, and who saw their lives be significantly disrupted by the occupation and by the convoy. And as a result, as an engaged citizen of the city, I'm also here to speak to you about this issue, which I see as very important. My message to you today is that it is premature to reopen Wellington Street. There are security reasons that have been noted The parliamentary committee that reviewed this issue only just completed its report. And I think that anybody who's ever dealt with the federal government in talking about land transfer, and I say this as somebody who was a volunteer at a daycare that had to deal with negotiations, know that it is too slow. That said, reopening to vehicle traffic, going back to what we were, is or what we had prior to the occupation, and is akin to telling our kids, that you can play video games before your homework is done. The work hasn't been done to reanimate the street, to rethink about what needs to be done. And there's been a lot of discussion here today about compromise. I think there is a lot of valuable compromise that there's a lot of room for improvement, and there's a lot of things that can be done right here by council or by the committee here today to effectively put the federal government on notice, to apply pressure, to say, are you serious about safety and security? Are you serious about reanimating Parliament? Are you serious about these things that you say you're serious about? Absolutely. But if it's only before, I believe the motion says March 1st, that doesn't allow adequate time to rethink of all the possibilities that are discussion, to put people first, to change the modal share of Wellington Street. I think if there's a greater timeline, whether it's January 2024, something along those lines, that would then apply the pressure, then allow people to actually get to the work and have specific direction on what council wants, or what this committee wants out of that space. So it's a message that I think that we're jumping the gun, having not done the work, having not found the resources to do something new, and that bureaucrats or public servants respond to the political direction. And I would encourage the elected officials to find that political direction and provide it, both in terms of finding the resources to appropriately animate the space, and to allow discussions to proceed in a normal fashion. And I'll just share anecdotally, I know that I moved to Ottawa just in the weeks before 9/11. And at that time, one could drive underneath the National Defense buildings. It was commonplace. You could park on Parliament Hill to go to the Byward Market. These were all things that were considered very, very normal by Ottawa. And very quickly, that landscape changed. The environment changed. The city evolved on those points. And I think that we're at a place now where that needs to evolve, and where that work needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. And I think that needs to be, the council needs to heed that notion of the urgency around acting, around applying the pressure, around finding the resources to do something a little different. I think there's been a lot of great suggestions so far on what can happen. But if we don't do it, if we don't seize the moment now, then it will be lost. Because once we go back to what it was, it's going to be very, very difficult to make that change, where it's just the status quo will prevail. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for hearing me today.
Great. And thank you very much for your delegation today. I don't see any questions from committee, but thank you. Councillor Troster, forgive me.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I just want to reiterate, one of my concerns is, what we saw during the convoy was our emergency services becoming completely overwhelmed because they were devoted to the task of protecting Parliament, which meant that danger and harassment and all sorts of terrible things spilled out into neighborhoods. I'm wondering if there's someone here from city staff, or perhaps Chair Tierney, who could speak to what our emergency services plan is should there be another threat of a vehicle-based protest.
Councillor Troster, just to make sure that they're in the room at the time, if we could ask that question to staff during questions to staff. But there certainly has been discussions, and that's why it was baked into the specific motion. We want to make sure we do this in the appropriate fashion for sure.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for your delegation.
And don't leave us yet, Stephen. Councillor Devine.
Hello, Stephen. And I don't really have a question for you, but I just want to to reinforce one of the comments you made and to thank you for it, just in case you do take off after you're done here. But this also is a similar thank you for Derek Simpson. I just want to let you know that I definitely do take to heart the comments you made, Derek, that what you're looking for is that whatever short-term plan we come up with does match a long-term vision. I absolutely echo that statement. I do fear that we're not yet at the place where we have that long-term vision in place. I feel the same way that you do, Steve, having 4 kids and a video game system myself, that putting them in front of the console and say, okay, but as long as you're done in 20 minutes, I'm not going to get them up to dinner in time. And I do agree with you, just to reinforce that I do think you're right, Derek, that it requires political vision to give direction to staff first. And I share the same concern you have, Stephen, that a return to the pre-convoy status quo, even if it is only done as a temporary measure, will reinforce that pattern. I think, like my kids in front of the console, it would be hard to pull them back. So I just want to thank you for your delegations, and I take that to heart.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for coming out today, Stephen. I'm seeing no further questions. Our next delegate is William Van Gies. And I believe there is a slide deck to go along with William's presentation today. We'll just get that loaded up for you there, William.
Thanks very much. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Chair.
Great. You're no stranger to this place. You have 5 minutes, a great presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, committee, for the opportunity to speak. As should be clear from the slides, I'm addressing you on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. Ecology Ottawa believes that Wellington Street should remain open to people. Over the past year, we've seen Wellington used for a variety of activities. There was a 2-day road hockey tournament here last August. Visitors and even locals have been enjoying the parliamentary precinct and the surrounding architecture in calmness and safety. People who work in the area can now bike there to their work safely. Even festivals on nearby Spark Street, like the Asian Night Market and the Busker Fest, have been able to safely spill over into the adjoining streets. Returning Wellington to cars would put an end to this. Instead, it would put more cars on the road, bringing the normal ecological consequences and making downtown more dangerous for people who walk, roll, and bike. Returning Wellington to cars is the opposite of what we should be doing in 2023, whether in light of the climate crisis, which City Council declared in 2019, or the pressing need for recreational spaces, cleaner air, or safer transportation networks. In fact, returning Wellington to cars contradicts the city's own commitments. In the recently approved official plan, for example, I'll ask for the slide to be changed. In the official plan, the second of 5 big policy moves, that is the document's basic principles, states that, I'm quoting here, by 2046, the majority of trips should be made by sustainable modes. And that to meet this goal, quoting again, increasing the share of trips by sustainable modes of transportation is urgently needed. Regarding the downtown in particular, the official plan also commits to, and I'll ask for the slide to be changed here again. Oh, sorry, that doesn't look very good. Anyway, I'm quoting here regarding the official plan on downtown. The transportation network for the downtown core shall prioritize walking and cycling for short trips and cycling in transit for longer trips, such that convenience and safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users shall take priority over private motor vehicle access and movement in the downtown core. In short, the city's own official documents and commitments support preserving Wellington for people and sustainable transportation modes rather than for cars. Interestingly, city staff acknowledge there is no need to return Wellington to cars. In a memo distributed to this very committee a week ago, and I'll ask for the slide to be changed again, Phil Landry, Director of Traffic Services with the city, wrote that, quoting here, the current closure to cars has not had a significant negative impact to the transportation network. In short, there is no reason to return Wellington to cars, And there's every reason to leave it open for people, and thus to fulfill the city's most basic commitments. Far from returning it to cars, Wellington's current state should be enhanced. First of all, as has been discussed already by other delegates, the federal government should be pressed to produce a plan to reanimate Wellington. This stretch is full of potential, both as a place to be and a place to travel through gently. And we should take advantage of that potential. Let the NCC run pilot projects like its highly successful bistros around Ottawa. Let the Downtown Revitalization Task Force that Member of Parliament Yasser Naqvi struck produce recommendations. Let the working group complete its report. Open a call for proposals for using this space. Second, Wellington's current configuration should be extended to fill gaps in our transportation network. And here I'll ask for this slide to be changed again. Thank you. So I've provided here a slide with a map of the current conditions where yellow and orange lines are existing bike infrastructure and red is the portion of Wellington currently open to people. This map shows how, if extended in three directions, that red area of Wellington could complete critical parts of the downtown biking network. So extending west would connect with the Bay Street biking facilities. Extending east would connect with the Mackenzie Avenue facilities and the Rideau Canal Eastern pathway, which of course goes for kilometers. And extending south on O'Connor would complete the last portion of the O'Connor Bikeway, which travels all the way to the Glebe. I have provided on the next slide another map that shows these connections with extensions along Wellington east and west in purple and extensions down to O'Connor or down O'Connor in green. In closing, Wellington is located in the densest part of Ottawa and is of central importance to the city, both as a place to be and an active transportation link. We urge you to keep it open for people. Thank you.
Great, great delegation, and your presentation is also on the drive for councillors to see as well. Looking around, I don't see any questions for a delegation, so thank you very much for, forget it. Hold on. Councillor Kavanagh, quick on the draw.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate the emphasis on cycling because that's something that I haven't heard much about. It's very important, and I'm glad you mentioned those gaps that exist, because even with that piece closed, it's hard to get to it. So there's definitely, when we talk about this closure, we need to talk about the infrastructure that leads to it for cyclists. So that's really important, and I'm glad you raised that. I really appreciate it, and I just wanted to let you know I've tried that route both before and after, and the before was horrible, absolutely horrible. Now that it's closed, it's great to go through it, but getting there is tough, so that's still an issue. So I'm glad you've made that point. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Troster.
Hello, William. Thank you for being here, and it's nice to see you again. My question for you is, I don't imagine that you'll be able to invent a whole new road design on the spot, but how could you imagine we might be able to design the street in such a way where there might be occasional access at specific times for delivery vehicles? Can you, is there a case study or an example from another city that you think might be useful? I'll just say, and I've said this before, I mean, I'm 100% with you. I want to make Wellington a place for people, but there are some very real concerns. Brenda Knight wasn't able to come here today, but I'm very aware of her position and the position of the seniors that live in her part of the neighborhood. They're finding it very hard for personal support workers and for visitors to be able to access their home. The closure on Wellington does create a little bit of, I hate to say Bermuda Triangle, but a little bit of a snag, and they're finding it very difficult also to get deliveries. So it's not just businesses. So I'm just wondering if you can think of a people-friendly solution that might work to help alleviate that problem.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor, for the question. Three things come to mind. So first of all, there are all sorts of other modes, as was mentioned earlier of making deliveries. We really need to up our cargo bike game in Ottawa. You know, we see so many deliveries go in these enormous vehicles, you know, and you know, over exaggerating the vehicles that we use is something that we've accepted as commonplace, but need not be. So I would, you know, urge, especially folks like the Sparks BIA, to really, you know, take an active role in promoting, you know, much more sustainable and much more agile modes for delivery. But, you know, some deliveries do still need to be made by a larger vehicle, in which case, you know, I would say, you know, delivery is a problem that cities need to solve. One way I've heard is just by going very early in the morning. You know, I don't know exactly what hours that would be, but essentially before, you know, the majority of people would be in the area. The last thing that I'll point out is, to my knowledge, there are no residences on that strip of Wellington. I may be wrong, so please correct me. So in terms of personal support workers, which, you know, is great, or very necessary, of course, I'm less concerned for that stretch of Wellington. And I know, you know, the roads to the south are perfectly car amenable for those personal support workers that need to use cars. You know, Albert and Slater are you know, very clear shots through the downtown core, and that's just two streets to the south. So you know, I'm also hoping that with the refurb of Albert and Slater and Queen, that biking around will be more of an option in downtown within, you know, the near future.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I will tell you, though, that during the campaign, the folks I heard from in the neighborhood who, you know, don't ride bicycles, like seniors, did have some concerns about this area, but I really do appreciate your deputation. And just as I mentioned before, I really wanted to make sure that should this committee vote to reopen, you know, even temporarily, that we did have some strong language in there about a pilot project this summer for active use with some actual resources attached to it, just so you can understand some of the conversations that have been happening on our end. But thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation, and thanks to Ecology Ottawa too.
Thank you, Councillor.
Great. Councillor Lowe.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, William, for your delegation. I note that you mentioned that by 2046, in the official plan, that most trips will be taken by a sustainable mode of transportation. In order to promote that sustainable mode of transportation, which includes transit, you have to I feel you have to make sure the transportation network is able to keep moving, and one of those ways is to ensure traffic is able to flow. And you also pointed out in the staff memo from Mr. Landry that, you know, as noted above, the current closure has not had a significant negative impact to the transportation network. However, the next few sentences says, however, it should be noted that there are major construction projects planned to continue in 2023 in the core that could further negatively impact traffic. Staff anticipate that construction-related activities along and in the vicinity of the Albert Street and Slater Street corridors in the coming years will significantly affect the movement of transit, traffic, and goods in the downtown core as lane reductions and detours are implemented to accommodate construction activities. So I feel that leaving that out was a little unfair for you know, unfair to the point overall. But do you have any comments or response to the points I made there?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor. And you're absolutely right. Transit is part of that shift to sustainable transportation. There's no question about that. You know, I will point out again that there are streets right in the area that can accommodate transit perfectly well. Queen, Albert, Slater. We also, of course, have the LRT, right? And so I think it's especially important to, you know, make sure that that's functioning and reliable for folks. You know, I think as a city densifies, you know, or in denser parts of a city, that's where increasingly a city needs to move toward even lower impact modes of transportation like biking and walking. Even though transit in the area, particularly the tram that's been proposed on Wellington, I think would be fantastic. So, you know, I don't think keeping Wellington open for people is sort of incommensurable with preserving transit access to the core. To the question about the other further on in the report, after the quote where I mentioned that there's no significant impact. That's right. That's a projection about the future that was in that report. I will say the report seems to me a little bit short on numbers. So, I would want to see a few of those numbers. But also, I think the report, to my reading, left out the important, phenomenon of traffic evaporation, which of course is the idea that once you slim down infrastructure for a particular mode, that mode essentially evaporates. And it's the opposite, of course, of induced demand, where you add infrastructure, then more of that mode comes. And that goes for cars just as well as other modes like biking and pedestrians and so on. And so, I think particularly in a dense area like the downtown core, where vying for space is what happens, traffic really needs to be managed, right? So that we are evaporating where we want it to evaporate, and we are inducing traffic of certain modes that we want to induce. And this is a perfect opportunity to do that, right? We already have the precedent. We have, the barriers in place. We have the signals removed. We are ready to go we even have these working groups, figuring out ways to reanimate the area. So we are ready to go with keeping Wellington open. And again, managing the types of traffic that we want in this area.
Thanks for the response. I appreciate the notes that you had mentioned about public transit in downtown, but I guess specifically what I was referring to was people who live further down routes, 5, 14, 6, 7, 11, and 10 that has to go through downtown before they get to their communities that are not necessarily served by LRT, don't have any east-west connections. Otherwise, that actually is where my concern lies, because my previous experience is that left turn from Queen to Bank, for example, and the afternoon peak is not easy, and I can only imagine it's going to get much more difficult without the east-west corridor alleviating a lot of the Gatineau-bound traffic or the Parkway-bound traffic. So thanks for that.
Yeah, there's no question. If I may, there's no question that we need to, solve traffic congestion problems in the downtown. I guess all the research would show that the solution isn't to widen, right, and to add car infrastructure. Is to use efficient modes, make it easier for people to travel by transit, make it easier for them to walk and bike and other, sustainable means.
Understood. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming out today. Seeing no further questions, I'll move to Linda Mathis. And I believe there's a slide deck as well. So as we bring, Linda, great. Hello. Perfect. We're loading them up for you right now. Oh, and so just turn on your microphone if you could pull it close to you. And I noticed Scooter's in here, which I kind of enjoy too in your photo, but you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Linda Matthews and I'm representing Parkways for People. Thank you for having me. This past fall, I had the good fortune to cycle with my family in France from Brittany Coast to Paris. Remarkably, we were able to ride into the capital right up to the front door of the Louvre. It was a network of segregated bike lanes, and we never needed to navigate any car traffic the whole trip. So what you see there is the facade of the Louvre and people rolling past their French heroes, and I can envision our capital strolling past our heroes, Terry Fox sculpture or the famous 5 sculpture. The next slide. Our city has done almost nothing with the Wellington closure over this past year to experiment with how this important public space could be better used. We have the ability to make meaningful changes so that the future generations can be proud. Creating a continuous active transportation network where Wellington is presently the missing link, stretching from the QED to the Western Parkway, is within our grasp. I urge, if you do choose to temporarily reopen the street to cars, that you commit to making Wellington a pilot this summer, as Ariel has commented, for active users only, and to establish a segregated bike lane year-round. What we know is that those capital cities that have taken the bold steps of reimagining their legislature precincts, reshaping them into placemaking hubs, have reaped the benefits. The leadership of mayors from Paris to Amsterdam to Bogota, Colombia, or Washington led in showing the rest of the world what can be done. No capital that allows cars to dominate their symbols of democracy will ever become models to aspire to. The disruption caused by the truck convoy has created the opportunity to put our dreams into action. Let's not squander this chance. The time is now. Thank you.
Great presentation and great illustrations. And you're quite correct. Councillor Troster really wants to see something in the summer, whether it's hockey on the streets or scootering on the streets on the weekends. So we're definitely looking at that. I'm looking around the board, looking around the room. I don't see any questions for our delegation, but thank you for coming out today.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Dave Robertson. And I believe I saw him. Oh, hey, I see you waving there, Dave. Great. Welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, committee members. Thank you very much. I sit on the board of Bike Ottawa and am here today to discuss the future of the iconic Wellington Street in the near term. It's unfortunate that we missed the opportunity to build on the momentum of the street being closed to cars, but this doesn't mean that we can't still do wonderful things to animate the space. We should not revert back to 5 lanes of car congestion, but instead take advantage of the situation and consider more creative ideas. Why? Well, according to the Ottawa Community Foundation from 2011, 42% of local residents do not own cars in the downtown core. 56% of them walk, 6% cycle, and the only other pedestrianized space downtown is Spark Street. The existing sidewalks become very congested at times in Wellington, and there was no safe way to get down the street on a bike before this new configuration. Bringing vehicles back to the street contradicts the city's own climate change master plan, which prioritizes strategies to reduce the reliance on personal vehicles. Also, council has declared a climate emergency, with 44% of our greenhouse gas emissions coming from our transportation sector. Bringing back vehicles would also contradict the new official plan, which prioritizes a shift to energy efficient transportation modes as a mitigation measure to climate change. And no, opening up the street does not decrease greenhouse gas emissions by easing congestion. It just induces demand for more car use, all while discouraging other modes of transportation. I'd like to talk now about the memorandum for the Wellington Street temporary road closure document. Keeping the street largely open to those outside of cars has been viewed as a cost. Has there been an assessment of the benefits to the community with less pedestrians and cyclists being hit by drivers, money saved from not responding to car crashes, less air pollution, or less noise pollution? The report notes that there were impacts along detour routes, but increase in traffic to the area can currently be managed through signal timing adjustments and other measures, the report stated, and this is good. Potential impacts on pedestrians and cyclists from detoured car traffic. The report says the increase in right or left turning traffic has the potential to lead to greater conflict and safety hazards between turning vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians in crosswalks. Well, I'm sure this can be managed by implementing known safety measures like no right turns on reds, advanced pedestrian leads, and physical changes to the streets like bulb outs. Police, fire, and ambulance services blocking car lanes on the detour routes should not be an excuse to open more car lanes. We don't need additional lanes on every street in the city just because an emergency might occur at some point. Construction is projected to impact traffic. Perhaps give people good options to get around these construction zones, like prioritizing emergency vehicles, public and active transportation to encourage residents to use alternative means of getting through the city. And twice, the report states that and I quote, "The closure of Wellington Street has not caused a total failure of the transportation network in the area." This is not surprising. It's called traffic evaporation. In fact, a paper in Municipal Engineer reviewed 70 road allocation cases, including testimonials from 200 traffic engineers and planners in multiple countries. The researchers concluded that predictions of unbearable traffic as a result of reallocating space away from private vehicles in most cases were alarmist. When lanes were reassigned from car traffic to higher capacity modes like active transport, traffic issues were less severe than expected and traffic volumes were significantly reduced. Let's have a look at what one of our cities, neighbor cities, is doing with pedestrianized spaces. In 2021, PricewaterhouseCoopers recommended to the City of Montreal that the key to revitalizing the city's core was more bike infrastructure and pedestrian streets. Montreal took their advice, and after the first year, the BIAs came back and they asked for more. The program was extended for another 3 years and now includes 10 major streets in the city. So let's make the city more livable for residents and enjoyable for tourists. Let's think more along the lines of the lovely example of William Street in the market. With all the wide open space that Wellington is, it could be a grand pedestrianized boulevard until permanent changes are made. So I say, let's do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave. Councillor Troster.
Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for being here. And I can only relay my own experiences cycling on Wellington. It was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I used to work in the market and trying to make a right turn from Sussex onto Wellington and almost getting, creamed by STO buses. A terrible experience. So I agree with you that we need to make pedestrian and cycling safety a huge priority on Wellington Street. My question to you is again, would you feel good about the idea of perhaps stipulating, if we decide to reopen the road temporarily to vehicular traffic, if we are able to allow for a temporary bike lane to ensure cycling safety in the interim? And if so, what do you think that would need to look like? I'm thinking of what Councillor Menard was able to do on the Bank Street Bridge. You mentioned Montreal, and one of the reasons Valérie Plante's government has been so successful in pedestrianization is because she has been doing a lot of pilot projects. I really believe you have to see it to believe it, which is why I have this language in here about a summer pilot for true pedestrianization. But I'm wondering if we can also reach a compromise position where we improve cycling safety dramatically and quickly should we reopen to vehicular traffic in the interim. We may have lost him. Okay. If we've lost him, I will just say that when we come to having conversations with staff after the delegations, I will ask about the feasibility of a temporary cycling lane on Wellington should we open it to vehicles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Looking around, seeing no further questions. Our next delegation is Gabriel Rivet Koenig. And I'm unsure if David is in the crowd or online. We'll just take a second to look. While we're looking for Gabriel, there's
I'm right. I'm online here.
Oh, great. Perfect.
I'm unable to start my video.
Yeah,
there we go.
Great. You have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. My name is Gabe, and I'm a full-time parent and resident who lives southeast of the downtown core. I want to start off by referencing MP Yasser Naqvi's birthday cake post on Twitter. Wellington Street, a place to run, walk, bike, and roll. And I'd like to add, sit in some shade, enjoy, relax, and eat from businesses on Spark Street. Ottawa had 11 months to do something, literally anything with Wellington. And not a single thing has been done except put up concrete barriers that did not even prevent people from driving onto the street. The city could have put benches, potted trees, tables, street art, anything. So yes, of course, it looks ugly. I would also like to add, as has been mentioned, if there are concerns about traffic congestion, the priority should be on making it easier and more accessible for people to access the downtown by transit and not driving cars. Why is there a motion now to go back to normal with Wellington Street instead of a motion delaying a decision until more data is collected and discussions be had with various levels of government? I went with my son to Spark Street for Poutine Fest back in the fall and walked the block up to Wellington Street to eat. I sat down on the curb and let my son run. I had to jump up and grab him when I realized that there were 2 cars driving east less than 20 feet away from him. We've biked through the area a few times and parked our bikes to explore Parliament Hill. But because people in cars drive onto the street, we don't visit that often. I raise this because as a family who does not own a car and continues to not pretend the pandemic is over, finding safe places to sit, play, and experience that do not allow vehicles to drive in them is basically zero. I know of maybe 4 to 5 toddler parks that are fully enclosed anywhere in the downtown. To some, Wellington Street, Wellington being transformed into a space for people may be an inconvenience of having to drive a couple extra blocks. And for others, it may be a chance to have a tiny bit of space that makes downtown an attractive destination for everyone in the city. People can drive absolutely everywhere in Ottawa. I've come face to face with vehicles on pathways, MUPs, in parks, and especially everywhere outside at Lansdowne. It's very hard to relax as a dad to a 3.5-year-old and just as a human being. Why does this matter to my family? Because of the current lack of daycare options for us at the moment, my son and I spend most days outside. We walk, bike, and try to take transit. We visited every single playground in a 5 to 10 kilometer radius of where we live. We have 4 annual museum passes. Incidentally, did you know you can't even take a bus directly to the National Museum of Science and Technology? To get home, we have to walk through an empty field, up the hill, across St. Laurent, up a block, and stand by a light pole to wait for a bus. I now carry an umbrella and a down blanket in my backpack for the days we go. 2 weeks ago, it took us 1.5 hours to get the 5 kilometers home, but at least my son doesn't shiver anymore while we wait. So what does this have to do with a few blocks of Wellington? There are few to none places residents of this city can go to experience public spaces that are easy to access, inexpensive or free of charge, and protected from the danger posed by people driving cars. Because for us, Wellington would provide one space that could be enjoyed, one space where I could sit and be a little less on guard and let my 3.5-year-old run more than 3 feet in front of me. To some, it's just a few useless blocks of the street that people should be able to drive on, and to others, it can be a safe and enjoyable experience. The most joy I've ever had in Ottawa was when the SJAM, QED, and Colonel By were open for us to walk, sit, ride, and enjoy as spaces to be in and move through. We need more permanent spaces like this because today there are basically zero. It would be wonderful if Wellington remained open to people. There is no reason for it to go back to normal because normal is terrible. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Troster.
Hi, Gabrielle. Thanks for being here today. And I remember those early days of the pandemic where the Queen Elizabeth driveway was some of the only open space I could take my daughter to. That's when she finally learned to ride her 2-wheel bike. And because parks were closed, it was literally the only place to go. My question for you is, when we think about a potential redesign or a summer pilot for pedestrianization, can you think of some elements that you would like to see that would be friendly to children the age of the ones in your family?
I mean, my kid doesn't need a whole lot. I mean, I think the biggest challenge at this junction in the pandemic, and at least in our life with him, is finding spaces where I can not be bored out of my mind all the time because we visit the same places over and over again. Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity for interactive design for kids. And I know from my own experience of 3 years of full-time parenting that having interactive and interesting spaces for adults who look after those kids is also a great benefit to the mental health of full-time parents.
Yeah, thank you. I'll say that during the campaign, I met a family that bought a bike rack for their car. They live in Centertown, but they bought a bike rack so they could drive their bikes to the canal because they didn't feel safe cycling just a few blocks downtown to get to a safe pathway. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Gabriel. Seeing no further questions, thanks for coming out today. We'll move on to our next delegation, Kevin McHale, Executive Director of the Sparks Street BIA and the Mall Authority.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak today. It's time to open Wellington up. The Sparks Street BIA and its members were surrounded by the participants of the trucker occupation for 3 weeks last February. Once the trucks were left, our businesses were inaccessible for an additional week as officials erected a fence around the entirety of the parliamentary precinct on the off chance that protesters would return. Almost a year after the truck convoy ensnarled downtown Ottawa, the rest of the city has moved on, yet businesses and residents of the downtown core continue to be reminded of that grueling month every day. The current closure of Wellington Street between Bank and Elgin, as well as the closure of O'Connor and Metcalfe between Wellington and Queen Street, have placed additional burdens on our members. The limited amount of surface parking in our area cannot be accessed by our members' clients and service providers. Loading zones are inaccessible, restricting deliveries. These issues add to the difficulty of operating a business in the downtown core. Commercial and residential streets like Elgin, Gloucester, Lyon, and Bank now host a regular flow of large trucks and other vehicles that they're not designed to handle. For decades, these vehicles use Metcalfe and O'Connor to move and travel back and forth between Highway 417 and Quebec. As more workers return to the downtown, these issues will only grow. In the fall of 2019, Ottawa City Council approved a public realm plan for Spark Street. For the first time ever, the boards of the Spark Street BIA, the Mall Authority, the federal government, the National Capital Commission, and the City of Ottawa worked together to develop a much-needed update for Spark Street. Our request for federal funding in support of the engineering phase of that project was lost as governments of all levels focused on their efforts to combat COVID-19. As we now move past the pandemic, it is time to get projects like the Spark Street Public Realm Plan back on track. Spark Street plays a unique role in downtown. We are the only organization that regularly works and engages with residents, local businesses, property owners, the city, and the federal government. We see how everyone uses the spaces around us and can provide a ground level perspective on what we feel will be invaluable during the proposed study. The Spark Street BIA and its members asked to be a part of the entire study as the City of Ottawa, federal government, and their consultants discuss the future of Wellington. It's imperative that everyone who works, lives, and plays in downtown Ottawa has an opportunity to voice their concerns and their ideas. We respectfully ask that everyone involved in the process come with an open mind, a willingness to listen, and committed to finding a solution suitable for everyone impacted. Until then, let's reopen Wellington and get downtown Ottawa moving again. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. You have quite a few questions. Councillor Troster with her real hand, and then we have Councillor Devine and Councillor Johnson with their virtual hands.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here. Nice to see you again. My question for you is, so Sparks is already a pedestrianized space, so I understand you have your own challenges with delivery. Sorry, I'm getting some weird feedback. Are there specific days of the week or times of the day that would be really important for Sparks Street businesses to be able to access deliveries via Wellington?
It's not even Wellington that's actually for the deliveries. It's the loading zones and such that we have on O'Connor and Metcalfe that you can't actually access because they're one-way streets. They had to be closed in order to facilitate Wellington. So as an example, one of the restaurants told us this week that since that closure's happened, they've lost 10,000 in business because they can't participate in online delivery services like Skip the Dishes or Uber Eats because those drivers can't get to their business close enough. So those are those spaces that are currently cut off from us to be accessed. Yeah, our businesses, we have a delivery window on Spark Street in the morning before 7 to 10 in the morning, where we try to get everyone in and out, construction, deliveries, etc. But there are times during the day where deliveries just have to come. You can't wait for FedEx or UPS to just deliver during a certain window. They're going to come when they come. And if their drivers can't get somewhere and park, they will just leave, and then you have to go to a depot at the south end of the city for pickup. And these things may seem minor and trivial, but if you're a shop that's gone through 3 years of pandemic, you don't have staff. You can't leave your business in the middle of the day anymore to go do that pickup. That means you're closing your business for the day. So, it's what I would, so it makes it very difficult to just continue operations.
Okay, and you will say that, having met with Sparks Free businesses, I have a tremendous amount of sympathy and solidarity. These folks were some of the ones that were hit the hardest by the convoy, and it's not lost on me that we're reaching the 1 year anniversary. So thank you so much for that. On to another issue. So should we do a weekend or summer closure? To me, it seems that Spark Street would be the logical partner in terms of festival programming. I mean, you do butt right up against Wellington Street. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but do you have any sense of, if we asked Spark Street to extend your festivals onto Wellington in the summer, seasonally or in some capacity, do you have any sense of what your financial ask might be, either of the city or of the feds? Any sort of roundabout figure of like what would allow you to do that?
It would be in the hundreds of thousands. Easily. I can give you an example that Busker Fest, which is a 4-day event on Civic Long Weekend in August, that costs the BIA between $60,000 and $75,000 to put on. And that's not factoring in things like the staff time that we put into that. That happens on three blocks of Spark Street, sometimes 4, depending on a deal, what kind of deal we can get with our performers. So extending something like that to Wellington alone, you're probably looking at $100,000 or more. An interesting example is that we used to do Busker Fest, the pitch sites used to be at the intersections themselves on Metcalfe and O'Connor. We stopped that a number of years ago because of the cost. Our security costs for staffing for those things were upwards of $10,000 just to have security guards manning the barrels in case emergency services needed to get through. So we actually pulled it within inside the street itself to save us those funds. Street closures for organizations like ours are not inexpensive. We become responsible for maintaining those road closures, and there's no support for those things at this time. So can we extend festivals? Can we look to work with third-party producers and help support them on those in the space of Wellington? Yes. It's also resource challenged. Over the years, we've wired Spark Street up, so we have electricity and water in places where we need it. None of those facilities exist on Wellington. The reality is it's a 6-lane highway running through downtown, and we acknowledge the fact that it can't stay like that, and we're not even thinking that. We think setting a segregated bike lanes through Wellington as an example is overdue. Absolutely. But the ability for our delivery vehicles or large trucks to not have to drive down Elgin Street at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night or ride down Bank Street blocking buses and regular traffic, that's not acceptable right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if any of our federal partners are watching this committee meeting, just to say we need resources to pedestrianize Wellington. And so this is the point that I wanted to draw out. And this is the point that I wanted to make about seeking partnership for a pilot project this summer. The reality is it doesn't cost nothing to make it a place for people. And I really do appreciate your comments today and for representing those businesses. Thanks so much.
Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Kevin. Thanks for coming. I am so appreciative that you're here and that you bring the interests of your BIA members. And I'm glad that you request the invitation to be part of any long-term multi-stakeholder conversation in coming to a sense of what the ultimate best end result of this is. I think that's the best way we have to go about this. We have to look at the needs of all various stakeholders involved and try to find where the common ground is and where the compromises can be. And I do believe that compromise is not a bad word. Transparency. I personally am not looking for a return to the pre-convoy status quo. And that would likely require compromises on the parts of what you're looking for there. So I'll have a question to you, but then I'll probably have to direct the question to staff later on because you might not have the answers, but I just want to ask you about your willingness of a certain compromise. You were mentioning that currently, due to the closures on Wellington, that vehicles can't, I think I understood this, can't access Metcalfe, the north-south Metcalfe and O'Connor as well.
Yes.
So if in the eventuality that a new Wellington did not allow for large truck deliveries on Wellington, but if it were such that, and this is a bit hypothetical, that Wellington were closed to large vehicles, but Metcalfe and O'Connor were reopened. And so, and I'm not even sure, I'll find out later if this is true or not, but on the assumption that that might be possible, you would not have your cake and be eating it too, but you'd have your cake. Would that be a compromise solution that Sparks BIA could be willing to, at a multi-stakeholder table, say, all right, I'm okay, I can live with this?
I like all kinds of desserts. Yeah, and I'm open to trying them all. No, I think I mean we had suggested to staff back in the summertime when we're first, with our frustrations that, open a single lane on north on Metcalfe, turning east onto east onto Wellington, so you could exit on Elgin or opposite from O'Connor. Extend one lane further east so traffic could return to O'Connor. Again, I'm open, Councillor, I agree. I don't think vehicles whipping along at 80 kilometers an hour, 100 kilometers an hour down Wellington is right. But for commerce to continue in our space, we need these lanes open. A struggle we have where we are is we don't have a concentration of population. So we are reliant on customers coming to us to a degree. And that's maybe even more so as the federal government, move their operations into buildings further south and more around us. It reduces that opportunity for residents to move further north into our space. I would be open to all kinds of things. The big thing for us again is, can we get through when our delivery windows on Sparks Street are open? Can we do that so that we're not forcing a vehicle to enter Elgin Street during the delivery window and drive all the way through 4 blocks when they could have exited at Metcalfe and gone through safely? I think that's the another element to it as well. Many of our members' customers, they're scared to come down because they're afraid of getting a ticket. They see the warning of like a $1,500 fine if they're caught through the space, and so they're not going to come and pick up something they ordered, or the customer just decides not to come down to that business because they feel they feel that all of downtown is still closed. I think that's a big perception that even I talk to people that I know that, they know what I do for a living and they think downtown's closed because you still have that showing up on Google Maps. You still have it showing up on your services that, no one can come through these spaces.
And because you're speaking both of your customers and your suppliers. Mm-hmm. And I do agree that the current perception from your customers that downtown is closed and therefore I will not come to it. That is the byproduct of, the messy situation we currently have. I think that perception can eventually be re-understood when we do have a new landscape. As for the complexity about your suppliers, when can they deliver and so forth, I do think that in my mind, that the ultimate thing we end up with will be a new system. It will have complexities. It will have different rules that people have to follow at different times. But I think the end result might be worth it to have that complexity as opposed to just having a current status quo. But thank you very much, Kevin.
Great. Looking around the table, I don't see any further questions. So thank you very much, Kevin, for coming up. Really appreciate it. Our last delegate is Ben Cool-Fergus. And I'm assuming Ben is joining us online. Oh, IRL in real life. Great.
I spoke to your father the other day.
You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. We're coming to you as a resident today. So it's kind of fitting that this matter be up for discussion on the same week that the survey come out that suggests that Ottawa is one of the most disappointing tourism destinations. I'm inclined to agree with the mayor's take that this is somewhat overblown, but I do want to come to this from that perspective. I worked several great years in tourism around Ottawa, in the visitor center, in and around Parliament, interacting with hundreds and thousands of tourists every day. And I'd like to think that my work there mitigated some of the disappointment. But one thing that I could not mitigate is a comment that I got quite a lot working around Confederation Boulevard in Parliament, is that Wellington, or rather Parliament, the Supreme Court, and all of the different historic sites that we're lucky to have in Ottawa are set on a strip mall arterial. It's the kind of place that says, come, take a picture, get out. Don't go downtown, don't cross it. There have been people, I've seen people try to take a picture of Parliament and the crosswalk at Metcalfe Street and almost get hit. And it's surely not a mistake that they repeated twice. Now that has changed. I'm not going to pretend that it's perfect. I don't think that anyone here has, but there is an opportunity here to change that. Now, as Councillor Troster outed me on that, I am from a political family, so I know that change is hard, and it's hard on decision makers. We are somewhat lucky in this situation where the street is already closed. People have adapted over the past year. This is as close to a blank slate as anyone is really given in politics, and certainly in matters of urban planning and transportation. There's been talk of compromise, and usually I'm a big advocate. It's often reasonable, but sometimes compromise means splitting the baby or building half a wheel. The temporary yo-yo closures will be disruptive, and pull from political experience, it also throws a political hot potato that I don't envy. Change is hard, but decisiveness is rewarded. The mayor said it best when commenting on the survey. Our greatest obstacle is sometimes ourselves. But with a bit of courage, we can also be our greatest hope. Thank you.
Great delegation, Ben. Thank you very much. Looking around, I don't see any questions. Oh, Councillor Johns.
I found a shortcut of actually just using my hand instead of hello. Okay, I'm not going to listen to myself. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for your comments. I didn't catch your name, so I don't know what family you're from or what kind of, I don't know, but I'm excited to meet you. And I think you've really, for me, articulated one of the tensions that's in front of us with this motion, where we have Wellington Street, but it acts as a road. And the choice becomes whether or not the identity of this piece of this stretch acts as a street or acts as a road. And what we want to see with a tourism angle is that the street generates wealth for the city of Ottawa in the ways that you've described. But a road also generates wealth in the sense that it can move goods and services from one place to another. And so we had that articulated by one of the other delegates. So I want to pursue this line of questioning when we speak with staff, but I just wanted to highlight what's coming alive for me between these two delegates and what some of the nuances are with the choice coming forward with respect to economic development for the area. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Devine.
What was your first name again? Ben. So Ben, thank you very much for several things. Not the least of which is telling me a better idea than I thought I had. I don't at all mind being humbled by a public delegate. And so I'm talking to you now, both because I want to thank you, but also because I want to reinforce that what you're doing and what many delegates have done here today is demonstrate to me the value of public delegations and the dialogue back and forth between us and you. I love being blown away by an idea that is better than mine. And I've long upheld the value, the political value and necessity of compromise as an essential tool. But you are absolutely right in telling me that sometimes compromise means building half a wheel. What a beautiful image you've planted in my head. Thank you for that. I still go back to or splitting the baby. Not so much a nice image, but still just as powerful. I do go back to, and so among many of the delegates here today, I'm writing down the nuggets that you are going to help me come up to a decision here. But I do go back to what another delegate was saying about what we need to come up with today is potentially a short-term plan that ultimately has to match a long-term vision. And the onus is on us to come to, through all of your participation, an understanding of that long-term vision so that we can wrestle and come with the best long-term vision. And you are absolutely right that sometimes it requires courage on our part to make that decision and not necessarily try to accommodate all the voices and come up with what could be a messy compromise. I don't yet know if the compromise we may or may not come forward with today is messy or actually good, but just thank you for giving me a lot of food for thought. Thanks, Ben.
Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for coming in this weather. Obviously, I'm not privy to any conversations that you and your father have, and it's just a personal curiosity. Have you and him, or has he raised any concerns that residents in Hull Aylmer have ever raised, discussed about the closure and or the possible reopening of Wellington Street?
I won't speak for him. We've not really talked about that. As I said, it's been a year since it's been closed. We've all adapted. No one has been waiting at home 12 months for this to be reopened in order to go to work, go shopping, go to the places that we go to. As far as we've discussed and as far as I've experienced and other people have experienced, this is the new status quo.
Understood. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ben, for coming out today. That concludes our delegation part of the meeting. And I do want to echo something Councillor Devine said. All the delegations that were here today were very professional, added something to the conversation, and it's a good vibe out of this conversation altogether. That being said, this is the opportunity to ask questions of staff. So if you do have questions of staff, please raise your virtual hand. First up, I'm going to go to, and forgive me, I'm old school, I'm going to go to committee members first. So Vice Chair Kitts.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll echo your comments. Thanks to all the delegations. Question for the Landrian team. I'll give you a minute to We're just giving everyone a moment to get seated for those watching online. Great, thank you. Can you walk us through some of the concerns you have regarding the impact to neighboring streets and what that might look like should Wellington stay closed, and given that the return to office might increase the volume?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Kitts. So I think the concerns we have is, and we're starting to see it now with the increased traffic volume because the federal government's coming back, employees come back to work. I'll give an example. Even the last 2 weeks, we've noticed that the Portage Bridge is now backed up like we used to see back before COVID because there's increased traffic. Even last week, I came to City Hall and the parking lot was almost full, where last year you had hundreds of open spaces. So we're just seeing more people coming back to work. And those that do come back by vehicle are being forced to go into the sort of secondary streets, especially if they're trying to cross the downtown, which just increases, like I noted in the memo, the risk of conflicts between pedestrians and cyclists and turning vehicles, because you can have more of those. You have more queuing. I know Queen Street's a challenge, especially Bank Street, because the buses turn left, as well as other traffic turns left, and no one can get around because we removed the left turn lane a few years ago when the road was rebuilt. So those kind of things are just going to start to increase. And then we're going to start to see people deciding to take other routes, potentially infiltrating further down into the community in the residential area south of Laurier, off the streets of Bay and things like that. So those are some of the concerns, and hence why, from a purely traffic perspective, if we were to reopen Wellington Street, it would alleviate some of those issues.
Okay, thank you. And I note, well, that you've noted here that the increase in right or left turning traffic has the potential to create a real safety issue. So have we seen an increase in number of, do we have data that confirms that there's been an increase in accidents or conflicts with pedestrian cyclists?
We don't have that data yet. I think it's just your increase in the risk of a potential collision to occur. Because those vehicles, because right now when the vehicles, if you're coming from the Rideau Street and you want to turn left onto Elgin, but then you either turn right onto Queen or right onto Albert, and then you sort of make right and left turns depending on where you want it to get to. So we don't have data at this point. Again, it takes a few months to get that information. So we would probably see something that we'd be able to report back, at some point next year or the year after. But our traffic study that we are in the process of beginning will be taking a look at that, among other things as well, in terms of what those impacts are and what are the measures that we should take if the final decision is to close the road permanently when we bring the report back at later date, what we can do to try to alleviate those concerns and issues.
Okay, thank you. And it notes too the major construction projects that are planned in the vicinity. I know, we have 2 seasons in Ottawa, winter and construction, but can you highlight some of the more significant ones that would have a direct impact?
Yeah, so for 2023, it's a lot of the continuation of what we saw last year. So, for example, Albert Street and Slater Street are under construction. There's the work that's being done just west of Bronson, tied to the library. The Chaudière Bridge is still closed, and that's still planned to be closed for this year. And then there's, I think the biggest challenge for Wellington right now with the closure is the fact that Lions only got one right turn lane and a through lane, but majority of people turn right there. And that's because of the work that's being done by the federal government, and they've taken a traffic lane, and that's going to be in place, I think, for the majority of this year as well. So again, those are just some challenges. We've put in measures to try to mitigate that. And for example, at Sir John A. Macdonald and Booth Street, we've permitted a temporary left turn so that we get, because prior to that, you weren't able to do that. So it's trying to get more people out of that Lyon Wellington intersection. So those are some of the things that we do from that perspective. And we also have our staff at our traffic center that monitors and makes adjustments to signal timing when we see sort of queues back up, and we can try to fix those with, we have over, I think every street in the core is pretty much covered with the traffic cameras, so we can see very quickly and make adjustments.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. A lot of the delegations and some colleagues alluded to the fact that we didn't leverage the last 11 months with some programming. So when was the working group with PSAC and the NCC struck?
Mr. Chair, that began in the fall. There was discussions that began in September, but the full working group was not established until about October.
Okay. And was there a reason for sort of a delay between us passing the resolution to close the street and that group being struck?
I think it was just timing and people gathering background information, the federal side and ourselves. There was I don't know of any real reasons for delay.
Okay. And I think there's a sentiment that's shared that, we do want to see this progress and take advantage of potentially a pilot program in the summer. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is there are you meeting frequently? Are those conversations progressing well? Do you need additional, is there an advocacy piece for counselors to play in terms of, what our partners are bringing to the table or if residents are interested in this file? Is there anything we can do to sort of nudge our partners into making this a priority?
Mr. Chair, the work that we have ahead of us is the traffic study, and that's basically just to get data. There's going to be ongoing discussions after that work is done, because, any closure will create traffic congestion somewhere else. So it's really a look at the degree of the impact and how it can be mitigated, and there are trade-offs to be had. So those discussions will continue, but it's our job to do that work and present to you options and consequences. And we are continuing weekly meetings with the transportation working group that was set up.
Oh, that's great. Great to hear. Okay. My last question. I think so. So basically, this work would be proceeded. We will get the data back, and then the conversations about, because something I would really like to see is those bollards that can be put into the ground, erected when needed. So would that be a subsequent conversation once we have the study back, the data back, or is that going to be something you're going to look at concurrently?
It's all part of the discussion, and definitely security is an important concern for our federal partners. And the bollards have already been discussed, the retractable bollards as one tool that can be used.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Kitts. And I think you've highlighted a point. Even this discussion here today is advancing what we've seen as a long process. And I think just this discussion today has gotten the eye of our federal partners. So there's only good in that. Councillor Dudas.
I wanted to double check. Was there any traffic assessment or public consultation done prior to the city's decision to close the road when it was initially done after the convoy?
No, there was a direction that came through a motion just to maintain the closure once the police operation was completed. So there was no consultation.
Okay. And then with all of any other temporary for long-term or permanent closures for roads across the city, we typically do some kind of consultation with stakeholders, the public, or we assess the impacts. Am I correct?
Yeah, so we would do that. Ms. Chi's group looks at that in terms of through studies. There's also a group in planning when there's permanent road closures. So there's a process in place, and that involves consultation.
Okay. And so if the city were to determine that, and I think it's an incredibly valuable and promising opportunity is to look at animating space or closing down the street temporarily throughout the summer for portions or weekends or something of that sort. Is there opportunities for the city to then appropriately prepare for that, determine what the traffic impacts are going to be, work with stakeholders like the BIA, for instance, local residents, visitors, tourist entities, to kind of accommodate those changes? So if we were to open it now and then temporarily close it for like a weekend or a week or something of that sort, we could accommodate that.
Yeah, we would take that back, and there's a special events advisory team that they deal with all the special events. So we will work with them. They would go out and if there's folks that are interested in having that area animated, we would work with them to make that happen. So I know that as part of the motion, we're committing to do that review and explore opportunities to do that with any partner that wants to come and do that.
Okay. I think the other thing I'm wondering is, I think the interesting part about where we're at with this conversation is it's actually not even just about traffic. It's a lot of our delegations mention this. It's about opportunities. And regardless of what has happened or not happened with that road over the last many months, it's opened up the conversation for the public, for ourselves, and even more importantly, for the federal government about what the future of Wellington and that section holds. But I think the thing that concerns me, and Councillor Kitts touched on it, is that one of the primary issues that came out of that occupation was jurisdictional challenges. And the fact that the city was responsible for a section of road that lies directly in front of our parliament, and the obstacles that pose, not just for policing, but for traffic, for our residents, and who is responsible for what. So once again, I'm not asking you to talk out of turn, and if you can't share this, that's fine. But has the federal government, in your conversations with them, yet come to the table with an offer to purchase the road from us, to accept the jurisdictional responsibilities, whether that be for traffic flow, policing, just the future of it? Because once again, we could reopen it, we can close it, we could do whatever we want with it. But at the end of the day, it truly belongs to the parliamentary precinct and the nation's capital, which is the federal government's jurisdiction.
Yes, that's the essence of the work that we're doing with PSPC. And it's part of the motion that you had passed last year for us to engage with our federal partners on the future of Wellington, and even the jurisdiction taking over the ownership of Wellington. So this is all part of it. And there's much more than just the traffic impact alone. The value of the road, and how it can be used, all the other planning studies that we have in the area. We have cycling projects planned for Wellington. We have Rideau Sussex Node project, the study that's been put on hold now because of what's going to happen to Wellington. There's the STO tramway project, a whole bunch of overlapping studies in the downtown. They all have to be taken into consideration. And if we do change ownership, then we want some of these important projects to still continue. So that'll be part of the negotiations with the feds as well.
I really appreciate that. And I think that's important to note that, I go back to my original question. We didn't do the work. We had no opportunity. It was a knee-jerk reaction to close the road. We didn't talk to people. We didn't talk to the federal government. We didn't talk to businesses. We didn't even really have a chance to talk amongst ourselves. We were doing what we needed to do to protect our residents and to make sure that our core is safe. But I think now's the time to go back and have that sober second thought, work closely with our federal partners, make sure that jurisdictional requirements are addressed, safety and public spacing is addressed, so that we can actually come out with the best plan for Wellington going forward. And, I'll stress, maybe not on the backs of Ottawa taxpayers. It should certainly be considered to be part of the national capital decision about how to improve our parliamentary precinct. So I support this motion, and I really do thank you for the work you're ongoing. I look forward to seeing what will come out of our discussions. And I also would support looking at temporary closures to see how we can pilot different opportunities down there. But I do think at this point in time, it needs to be reopened, and we need to have a stronger long-term view for the vision of Wellington.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Dudas. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me? So my question is also around temporary closures. So the motion does indicate that staff will be exploring options for temporary closures. I know I'd like to see some sort of pilot around weekend closures. Is the intent that staff will complete their study of options for temporary closures before we fully reopen the street? I know that there's some time to get the street back operational and work that needs to be done. So I'm just wondering if that's the intent. So will something come forward before we reopen the street to traffic fully? And just continuing with what Councillor Dudas said, will there be consultation as part of that work?
In terms of reporting back to committee and council, I don't think that was the intent. Our intent is to go and explore options. We could write a memo in terms of informing council what the plans are in terms of the type of closures and the success we've had working with the local ward councillor and the BIA and others and other stakeholders, and provide that information at that time.
Can I, do you mind if I respond? Thank you. I just wanted to let you know, if you take a look at the motion, there's some language at the end to say that, our office, the Somerset Ward office, is very keen to work with the mayor's office and with staff to figure out a plan. We could add a friendly amendment to this motion saying that we revisit the plan for a pilot project at a future transportation committee meeting where we can set a date, sometime before the snow dries. But, I would like to get a sense of what it would cost. And that's part of why I asked Kevin from Spark Street to also give us a sense of what it would cost to work with them to extend programming. So that's why that language is there. But if you have proposals on how to strengthen that, I would certainly be open to them.
I think my concern too was that if we fully reopen the street without a pilot project in place, that people are going to get used to that traffic flow again. And it will be harder for us as a committee to introduce a new closure. So it would be nice to have that plan in place before we fully reopen the street, so we can message that all at once to the public. So I guess it wasn't necessarily a report back for options for consideration, but just if the intent of the motion was that that plan would be in place, that exploring of options would be done before we reopened the street. If that's more clear, I guess that would be to Phil.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But I also note that pre the closure we had last year, Wellington was closed at different times because of special events. Team Canada Day, we also had Bike Day, bike race and things like that. So, through our special events program and teams that we have here at the city, we work collaboratively with event organizers. And one of the goals here would be to promote Wellington Street as an opportunity where in the past they may not have considered it. Similar to if you think of the hockey tournament that we had last summer, the proponent came in and identified an area and we said, well, why don't you look at Wellington Street as an option? And I thought that was a great idea. So those are the kind of things that we're going to try to look for from moving forward. But I just want to make the point that we've closed before Wellington Street on weekends and temporarily for special events, and it would follow that same path.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Pardon me, Glenn, I missed you on my sheet here, Councillor Gower.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, people keep taking my questions, so thank you. Yes, hello from Stittsville. It looks like I'm in a closet, but it's actually my ward office. Following up on the study, so see, it's Parsons Corporation that's doing the study. Last year, we went through a process around a road project on Stittsville Main Street, a public realm plan, and we're actually in the middle of a process that Parsons is managing now for an environmental assessment study for Huntmar and Stittsville, Maine. Through those studies, there have been a number of check-ins, public meetings with stakeholders and residents, and it's been a really good process because we've seen where feedback from people who live in the area provide input, and then in the next iteration, we see changes. Is that the kind of study that Parsons is doing, or are we only going to see the results when it comes to transportation community committee in 2024? Just trying to get a sense of more around the context or parameters or approach of that study.
Councillor, the study that Parsons, that we're working with them on finalizing the scope of the work for the traffic study on Wellington is very, very technical. It's just focusing on modeling, looking at the impacts. That does not have a public consultation component because they need to get this thing done quickly. Our partners with PSPC would like to speed up the timelines on this study. Besides the transportation working group that we have, that PSPC has set up, they also are working with us on a communications working group, and also an outreach consultation working group. So there are a number of ways for the public to be engaged, starting with this IPD. This is the first step since last year that we're coming back and it's opening up the file, introducing the file, and it states what we're going to do next. We're still feeling our way because it's a very complex project. And there was a question about jurisdiction. We also have utilities underneath the road. So lots and lots of things to consider. How do we access the utilities to maintain our assets, and so on. So we're focusing right now on just the transportation component, but there's much, much more. And as we put these pieces together, we will definitely be coming to you with information, with recommendations, seeking guidance as well.
Okay, thank you. So it does seem likely that sometime in the next few years, there'll be a reconfiguration of Wellington Street. If we could look ahead, would there be an environmental assessment required? I'm trying to get a sense of what other studies and consultation, what is a roadmap if a major reconfiguration is made? What's a realistic timeline that we could provide to interested residents and stakeholders on this?
I'm not sure of that yet, but I know that the parliamentary precinct and PSPC would like a shorter timeline than longer. And if we if we do come to an agreement between the city and the fence to transfer the lands, then they will have ownership of that road. They would have to go through the processes that they need to consult and so on.
Okay. When we did pass this motion last February, it was in the interest of safety and security in the parliamentary district. And the motion itself, the whereas referenced the 2022 occupation, also referenced events in 2015 and 1989. What I haven't heard a lot of discussion on today is it safe to reopen? Have we had assessments from the Ottawa Police or from parliamentary security officials that it's advisable to reopen the street at this time?
I'll just add real quickly, Councillor Gower, we've been working with the police. I myself, Mayor Sutcliffe, we've had discussions with them. Certainly that is a paramount. As it currently stands, you also know the street isn't truly secure at this point. There's commercial vehicles, there's residential vehicles. While I was doing a clip with a media outlet on the street, I was passed by 15 cars. So it's not like they're stopping people already. But we certainly are cognizant of that, and it is part of the plan, and we're consulting with them as we prepare to reopen. Does that satisfy you?
Yes, and I would think if there were serious concerns, we'd be hearing about it at committee today from one of those two groups, and I don't think we have so far. Yeah, I'm very well at this point supporting the motion, but I think too we have to think of it. Last year we temporarily closed Wellington Street. This motion would temporarily reopen it, and I think there's some consensus growing here in our council that it definitely needs a reconfiguration. I'm interested in Councillor Troster's idea about temporary cycling, a bike lane to make it safer for cyclists. I think that's good. Really quickly, we closed the street in Stittsville in 2017. It was before I was a councillor. And it's 340 meters of road. It's a recreational path, a multi-use pathway now. And if you see it today, there's people walking their dogs, pushing strollers, maybe cross-country skiing today. It's a very popular route, but there's still many people in the community who are very bitter that the city turned a road into a multi-use pathway. This is John Woods between Maple Grove and Rosehill. And I think the lesson learned from that, I was a community association member at the time, was it is important that you do the research and you do the consultant and the engagement. And it's important to get buy-in from residents by going through that process before you make a big change. That didn't happen in Stittsville, and it became an election issue. And there's still a lot of distrust between some residents and the city because of the process. There wasn't a solid process and a way to engage with residents. And it is frustrating sometimes that these studies and this engagement takes a long time, but if it's done right and you get the buy-in, it makes overall for a stronger project and the best solution and the best decision-making going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Devine.
Thank you. I thought somebody else was up before me, but I'm ready and raring to go. So just to echo Councillor Bradley's point, while I am certainly looking to some kind of modification to what we have currently, I do, echo the concern that if we return to a full-on pre-COVID, pre-convoy status quo, that we possibly could entrench things. So I just want to say that I have that concern. I want to back up some of what Councillor Gower was saying about safety concerns, because while I fully understood, and I heard from Chief of Police Stubbs that they are prepared to prevent the same kind of attack we had, whereas should occupiers telegraph their intentions to us as they did before, we will not make the same mistake again. I get that. However, if our fortress has been attacked from the east and all we do is defend the east without looking at the northwest, and so then we still risk attack. If we reopen fully, and the way that we are prepared to reopen fully, correct me if I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but nothing would prevent a large vehicle from just, without telegraphing their intention, just driving down and planting their way on Wellington. We could stop a well-telegraphed with all the intel but nothing could stop just one person wanting to take advantage of this target of opportunity. Is that right?
Well, if traffic was reopened, any vehicle could go onto that street. And if they chose to stop, then again, they would do that. I think Mr. Ayette's on the line, so he may be better positioned in terms of the security, because our focus today has really been on the traffic.
Yeah.
But Mr. Ayette would probably, if you have questions in terms of from the security perspective, as much as he can do, because again, the police would be the ones that would really have that information. Well, maybe I'll pass it over to Mr. Ayette to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to deal with that question. You're correct. A vehicle could go there and stop, and they would face all the consequences of doing so, such as bylaw infractions, being towed and being removed. And it's our full intention to do that in not only the coming days and months, but for example, this weekend we have extra bylaw officers, going to be down in that area. Police are well prepared to deal with that type of situation. So we can't say they couldn't do it, although this road won't be open this weekend, but in the future they could do it, but they'll also face the consequences of that illegal activity.
And I just want to be cognizant of the fact that we would therefore be potentially opening ourselves up to that opportunity. My next question, with regards to the projections for, future looking vehicle capacity, I was at a meeting for a development where we were talking about increased capacity due to a project development, and the transportation engineer at the meeting had a really good point that that registered for me. So just as here today, 4 of the committee members are participating in this meeting without having to take any vehicle to get to it, just as 3 of the delegates presented here today, and they are present here today without having to take a vehicle to get to it, but they are still present here today. In the report you had in the document, which said that over the course of the document that projects that we may see an increase in capacity as the feds open up and mandate return to work, with the clear knowledge that due to this technology, the future of attending events does not necessarily require getting out of your pajamas, let alone getting into a vehicle. Do your traffic study projections on the future capacity needs for people to attend things, do they take into account that those attendances don't always require the use of a road?
So in terms of the future, I know that there's been work being done, even right now through the TMP, and the OD studies have been done to try to get an understanding of, we're not seeing people come back 5 days a week like we used to in the past. And we're in the middle of it right now. And as time goes on, like even last year compared to this year will be different, because people are being told, at least at the federal level, to come in to work for 2 days a week. So I think that work that's ongoing, the challenge is that it's really hard to crystal ball that in terms of what that's going to look like. But we just did complete the OD study survey. I think it was last fall. And we're in the process of analyzing that data, which will then help us form projections moving forward in terms of what the needs and how we assess that. And that's part of this project as well, as the consultant will take a look at that information, because part of the work, especially for looking forward 15, 20 years from now, what will we need based on all the development that's happening in intensification, and also the knowledge that we're trying to get more people to take, transit and cycling and walking, what that all means. It's just really difficult now. If we were 5 years ago where we didn't have COVID and it'd be a lot simpler, but it just makes it complicated because we're in the middle of it versus 5 years from now when we really have a good picture from that perspective.
And I do recognize the quid pro quo, whereas even if it's true that fewer people will be requiring a vehicle, through intensification, there will be more people in the core. So that may even balance out. 2 more questions, which may ultimately be the responsibility of the NCC, should they bear the costs of everything we're talking about here. In one of the reports, you indicated the cost. I think it was $55,000 for the costs of putting in closures and reopening those closures. Can I assume that if we embark on a pilot project where the closing and reopening of Wellington for events or programs or whatever might be a standard course of events where habitually on a cycle, we close and reopen. If it costs $55,000 to do it on an impromptu basis, can I assume that should we get into a habit of doing this, that those costs on a per instance basis would our nimbleness make the cost of doing that implementation cheaper over time?
Yeah, I think like one of the things that we would do, especially in light of wanting to have sort of closures on weekends for events and that, is we'll develop a plan. So it'll just become like a cookie cutter plan in terms of, okay, you want to close the road this weekend, this is what you need.
Yeah.
It won't be that expensive as the 55,000, because that also includes us removing 2 traffic signals. We're not going to remove traffic signals for a temporary closure for a weekend.
Yeah.
And the reason we did that was just back last spring, we were seeing that, there was no traffic, so pedestrians were crossing whenever, but then where there were cars, they saw the green light and it was just becoming a safety concern. So it made sense to put the stop signs in. So the plan would be, I would say that, like I said, we're going to formalize things and we're going to make it, safe, but it would be the least expensive as possible. Similar to what we do today for other special events when roads are closed, there's always a security component in terms of the type of closure. Is it, hard barriers? Is it fencing? And things like that based on that work that we do with our partners.
Great. One last question. I am certainly hoping to look forward to a Wellington that focuses both on safe and free access for people, but also access for circulation of vehicles that need it, whether that be transit or delivery vehicles or whatever. And I'm looking for technology to help implement that in a way that is safe. On the issue of bollards, I've seen other cities implement bollard systems where they operate up and down, not just a concrete bollard, but up and down on a hydraulic system where the bollard is communicating through a sensor to, let's say, a public transit vehicle or a delivery vehicle, a registered, understood delivery with a license to have an access to that beep. If I wanted to look for studies on the effectiveness of that kind of traffic control bollard system without putting any onus on the city to do too much work, could we find that information? Should we want to, as we try to imagine what the future of Wellington might be? I'm not directing right now. I'm just asking, could we get that information if we needed to?
Yes, we could. I mean, the focus we're working on right now is the traffic study to see what the implications are. There's going to be future studies in terms of what's, assuming, assuming that the decision is we're going to close Wellington Street. Well, there needs to be work done in terms of what does the closed section of Wellington look like in terms of, and then there'll be a security component to that. So if the bollards, there'll be studies on the types of bollards or different type materials. So I think that's more in the future.
Absolutely.
Once the decision's made in terms of what we're doing with that section of road.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. In real life hand, Councillor DesRoches.
Sorry for being so persistent, Chair. I've not looked up here, so I know I'm on your list. Thank you. Prior to considering this today, I was open-minded to the options here, in part because I'm interested in this Public Order Emergencies Commission and the work that they're doing, and they will be reporting shortly. And I'm hoping that in addition to recommendations on sort of what happened and how can we prevent a similar situation, that there will be some recommendations for enhancing the parliamentary precinct. And I'm wondering if we're anticipating any recommendations that will deal with that kind of engineering as a part of this. I know you can't read the mind of the commission, but based on our participation to date, do we think this will give us any insights on the engineering around the precinct?
I'm not aware of anything. I don't know if Mr. Ayotte would be. So we're focused on the traffic. So
I'm not aware of any direction or indication from the commission hearings that they would be going down that road.
Okay, that's helpful. What I found compelling today was, the feedback from my colleague in terms of the impacts on business, the impacts in terms of the seniors in the area having access to the services and that. So again, I'll be supporting the motion. I think I've certainly seen in my ward where we have Canadian Forces Base Leitrim, the road was adjacent to the building, built in the the 60s and 70s, just really not up to sort of modern standards. And the federal government paid in its entirety to have the road moved in order to protect the residents and I think protect the men and women who are at CFS Leitrim. So I see this through this exercise. I hope that we're through your work and sending the signal that there's high expectations of this municipality, that the federal government, whatever we do here, will play a big role in terms of financing it and taking their responsibility to protect the capital very seriously. So again, I'll be supporting this, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the delegations and to staff today for their feedback.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. To my understanding, the traffic signals were removed at Metcalfe and O'Connor, correct? Do you believe that staff have enough time to be able to reinstall those signals? Were those specific signal heads redeployed at all, or are they basically on hand to be put back up quickly?
We estimate it'll take between 4 and 8 weeks to get the signals reinstalled, because when we remove the signals, we also remove the power supply from hydro. So we have to go and reapply for it, and that takes a bit of time. But we do have the material in terms of that, and we would schedule it. And we would do a coordinated approach in terms of how that all gets reopened and from that perspective. So yeah, it can be reopened, but it wouldn't open, you know, if this gets approved by council on the 8th of February, it's not getting open on the 9th because it's going to take time.
And what, other than the signals, what else was done as a result of the closure, and therefore what has to be what else has to be reversed in order to reopen Wellington Street?
The big change with the signals, I mean, we put barriers. The NCC last year provided the planters, so it's just removing those. It's removing the stop signs that were installed, but again, that would be coordinated through there. So it's not major work in terms of that. There's no reconstruction that's required because we really didn't do any construction when we closed it. We just put the hard barriers down.
And okay, my last question is in the fifth operative clause in the motion there. It says that staff will continue to work with Public Service Procurement Canada, finalizing a traffic study and report back to Transportation Committee and Council in the first quarter of 2024, as soon as the study is complete, including an update. I was wondering, what timeline do you envision that like a first update can come to committee?
Yeah, so the plan is to bring the report at that time. So again, we're trying to accelerate the work because I know the federal government want it done sooner versus later, but it takes time to do. We have to do modeling. We have to do assumptions. We need to look at countermeasures. So if we see there's issues, what are we doing in terms of trying to address the concerns? So in talking with Parsons, they feel that 10 to 12 months would complete the work. If it could get done sooner, we'll be here sooner. I mean, we want to get this at least the traffic part of it complete, but there's other work going on in terms of like Ms. Chi noted, there's all the infrastructure under the road and things like that, how do you deal with that and things like that. So I think we'll come back as soon as the work's done to provide the information so council can make an informed decision in terms of what are the next steps.
Would it be fair to ask for update midway, let's say at 6 months? Like an update, not the final report.
Chair, I think if you can leave it to direction to staff, so, or at least if we find that there's something important that you must know, of course, it is our duty to bring that up and report to you. But if it's proceeding, and when you were asking about the updates, it's if there was anything else we found out during the year, during the study that we need to bring to your attention, we would with that last report.
Okay.
Great. Is that satisfactory, Councillor Lowe?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'd say so. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Troster.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. So quick question. When the street was originally closed in February 2022, was there any discussion or accommodation for programming of the street at the time, or was it simply, you'll have to forgive me, I'm a new councillor, shut it down, this isn't safe right now?
Correct.
Correct, shut it down, it wasn't safe. Okay, so why do you think that only one significant event was organized on the street in the last 11 months? There was that hockey game, which the photos were fantastic. Do you have a sense?
I mean, there has been some events. I mean, we had the hockey tournament, so I think there's been opportunities, but there's been no, from the city's perspective, because we're the owners of the road, the direction was to close the road, and that's what we did. And and anyways, like we saw with the hockey tournament, I think there's been other events as well that have occurred. We've taken those, but that's That's
Okay.
it, I think.
Yeah, and to Councillor Dudas's point, I mean, it's hard not to feel like we're part of a high stakes chess game as we sit in this committee meeting, because there's clearly parallel conversations going on between the federal government and the mayor's office. But just one question, I know the answer to this because we had an email exchange, but assuming I put a friendly amendment forward to allow for a immediate temporary bike lane when we should we reopen Wellington Street? Is that something do you think staff can accommodate? Great.
Yeah.
So that is what I plan to do. The other question is, so I'll tell you how, I mean, I'm an idealist, but I'm also a pragmatist. So, and as I said, I know that a lot of this is going on outside of this committee, but my preoccupations, should we reopen Wellington? I have three things. Number one, to make sure emergency services are never overwhelmed again, so that the residents in my ward and around the city are never threatened because emergency resources don't have any resources to be able to help them. Number two, I want to leave the street better than it was when we closed it originally. You know, my daughter's a Girl Guide, leave your campsite better than when you first approached it. So if we can make an immediate improvement to cycling and pedestrian safety with the temporary bike lane, I think that's a huge win. And then also, Mr. Chair, you'll have to let me know what you think the best mechanism is, because I would like us as a transportation committee to specifically visit what a seasonal closure and animation would look like, and to lay out the parameters of that project. But I want to give staff time to think about it and for our offices to all talk to each other. So I don't know if it's better to bring a motion forward in March to say we'll discuss this in April and May, or if we should amend this motion to indicate a specific timeline for our committee discussing a seasonal closure.
I'll let Phil comment on it, but I think could this be way of direction where we'll come back or update by memo after we've met as a committee?
Yeah, no, we'll work with your office and with the seat, and we can send a memo to council when we sort of identified sort of a framework on how this can work.
That's great, because then again, Kevin was here. This is not going to cost nothing. And for the federal partners who are watching this, if you really want to see this happen, we would love some resources, because it's clearly a priority for our federal partners. And also, you know, I think the concern, let's be honest, is that the feds could always expropriate if they wanted to. They really could. We don't want them to, though. We want them to come to the table as equal partners. And if they want this street, it needs to be a true negotiation. And we need to make sure that it doesn't just sit there empty and abandoned with concrete barriers and nothing going on for any longer than a year. So thank you very much. So I am comfortable supporting this motion with strong language about putting a temporary bike lane in, and with direction to staff that we revisit this before the spring to come up with some very strong parameters, because I believe, much like the city of Montreal that's had very effective pilots, people have to see it to believe it. So for people to understand the potential, and this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to pedestrianize Wellington Street, they need to see what's possible. And right now they are not. So thank you very much.
And thank you for working with us on all that language, even right up to the last minute. So we appreciate it. And Phil supports the last wording of the language. So we're all in harmony. Next up, Councillor Lugoff.
I really like this discussion about making this area like a welcoming and open space, room to walk and play and enjoy green space in a ward where there's very little green space, as Councillor Troster has pointed out. But as we're hearing, this discussion really lacks context. We've heard this from every single comment and question that we've had here around this table today. So it's obvious that we need to look at this in a more wholesome manner. Things to consider. Spark Street has been dead since it was closed to traffic. Absolutely dead. We spent tens of millions of dollars several times trying to reimagine the space, and it's still dead, and we're about to do it again. What kind of hubris does it take to think that Wellington's going to be any different without looking at this in a more fulsome and wholesome manner, right? Queen Street certainly was not built to handle the amount of traffic that it's being forced to handle right now. Infrastructure in the downtown core is failing under current conditions. But imagine what the situation is going to be like when we have a downtown arena and attractions about 1 kilometer away, because the NCC has far more plans for other parcels of land there. And we've got a library that's opening up there, one that's going to attract quite a few people, great amenities. And if you haven't taken a look at what Adesoka is going to offer, I would say you should. A little plug for the incredible Ottawa Public Library. We can try to force people to take transit and bike all year round, but there are public servants that live in my ward and others who do not have this option because taking public transit is either unreliable right now, they have no service at all to their area, or because they have to pick up their kids from school on a time limit after work. The feds are forcing public servants back to work while refusing to help alleviate the traffic woes in the East End by engaging with us properly on the Brian Coburn extension and the BRT, which, by the way, would probably make public transit a viable option for many residents in Councillor Kitz's ward and in the East End. So there needs to be a discussion about traffic and green space in the core in a larger context, because the piecemeal approach that we've taken over the course of the last few terms is not working. You know, are we going to have a Gatineau tram on Wellington? What's happening with Sparks? What does personal choice in transportation rank? Where does it rank in the decision making here? Are we properly considering accessibility when we shut down access to Parliament? How are people going to come and make delegations if they need to be dropped off in a paratranspo bus? How are deliveries going to be conducted in the core? How are we going to be making it more difficult for businesses who may decide to relocate elsewhere to serve residents who choose to drive, which will continue to deaden this area? What's our plan for EMS? We heard that in the last group of questioning. What other discussions are ongoing with the feds? And are we spinning our tires as the feds are considering just taking over the entire precinct? In the absence of answers to these questions, we should support this motion and offer relief that's desperately needed for the buses and other vehicles that are traveling on Wellington. I love the idea of adding a temporary bike lane as well to ensure that there are some other options. There should be some choice in how we're going to move about the core, for sure. What we really need is a proper plan for traffic circulation on the core. It's an absolute mess right now. This should be part of a larger discussion. It's almost like we should, engage or undertake a transportation master plan. Oh, wait, that's what we're about to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Councillor Johnson, and then Councillor DeRuse, and then Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm really pleased to see, having been only to a few council and committee meetings, to see the richness and depth that's added in conversation when we talk about something that we see on a piece of paper. What I think I had said to some of my council colleagues ahead of time was that, to have a proper transparency on the true complexity of the issue in front of us was going to be very important for stakeholders to understand. Because as we saw from the delegations today, what this motion looks like and what it really is are kind of two different things. What it looks like is that we are, for the sake of safety, because our detours are causing, congestion that can have a safety concern, that we're in fact opening a street to cars. That on its face looks strange, right? It's hard to understand. How is it that by opening a street, we will actually increase safety to vehicle traffic? And that is one of the really interesting nuances of traffic engineering. And that's why I'm very excited to be on this committee. Enthusiasm is worth 10 IQ points, I know, but I tend to be enthusiastic about learning. And I do think we have a lot to unpack in that transportation master plan when it comes to the policies that help us support our residents to move around our cities safely. And I think there's quite a bit of civic education that could be really helpful for us to be able to build trust with our residents around how we create safety for people moving through our neighborhoods through all their transportation options, including drivers. So I'm looking forward to working on that. I've been trying to create a parallel in my head to what it might look like to close traffic on another big road. Because again, we've got this road, an arterial road. It has interjurisdictional implications, but it also has interprovincial implications that are quite significant for this area. And I don't think there is a comparison. I was thinking about maybe Robertson Road in Bell's Corners. Robertson Road is a very big road. It has a lot of small businesses around it that are really looking for that investment and that customer base. But it is this extra level of jurisdiction that Councillor Dudas so beautifully articulated that does not allow us to compare to other roads. And so that is the elephant in the room on the table here. And so, with the understanding that what we're trying to do here is initiate a timeline that serves residents better, that serves the safety of residents in the pedestrianized space in a longer term vision, this motion is asking us to reopen to cars. So there is a pill to swallow on this one that I wanted to say that I've been really engaged in everyone's perspectives. I appreciate Councillor Troster's leadership in trying to get this right. The motion starts somewhere in the first whereas and ends up in a very different place by the therefore be it resolved. It's quite a juggle. And so for this reason, I will be supporting the motion. I think that we are working towards a larger picture here, but I wanted to acknowledge that this complexity and this appearance of opening a road to traffic to actually create pedestrianized space is, insert word here. It's a bit of magic. It's a bit of a sleight of hand, and I understand what we're doing, and I want to participate transparently in the larger objective, but I wanted to be able to say quite carefully, well, maybe less carefully than how some of the other people have said it, but what we're trying to do here. So thank you for the opportunity to share in my way, and back to you, Chair.
Great. Thank you for that. Councillor Drews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief because most of we've been hearing and listening to our delegation, and I want to thank them all this morning. I love what Councillor Luloff brought up, and I did, Councillor Johnson, also thank you very much for your input on that. The thing is, we have a federal partner right now, and for us to put pressure, and we need to make sure that this is not only the city of Ottawa's decision, and we understand that, and we've been discussing that, but there is also a federal servant that they work in the downtown. We have people who live in a rural area that they also sometimes they can take a transit, and Councillor Luloff brought this up. I don't want to repeat all that, but I want to highlight the leadership Councillor Troster is taking today, and I'm really impressed, and I'm happy to see as colleagues we're all working together for the same interest. We need to open Wellington and what way and how we like to see it. I'm more interested to see how we're gonna revamp and look at downtown from Spark Street to Queen Street to all these connectivity and add green space and make it better for pedestrian and cyclists and trying to accommodate everybody who live in the city. So, Mr. Chair, I will be supporting the motion, and I'm looking forward for our conversation with NCC, with our federal partner, and my colleague at Transportation Committee. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Drews and Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is something that is an issue that I feel very strongly about. I worked on Parliament Hill for almost 30 years, and one of my jobs was a committee coordinator going back and forth across Wellington to go to committees. So I spent a lot of time there and dodging traffic and the bus services and all that stuff. I've been enjoying the fact that the road is closed for cycling, but it's really kind of piecemeal. It's not great. And that I want to thank Councillor Troster. That's what I wanted to raise, was about the cycle infrastructure. I cannot feel comfortable about reopening without proper cycle infrastructure in place. And when I say that, I don't mean just for the length that is closed. I'm talking about the connecting factors on both sides. As Councillor Troster raised, getting from Sussex to Wellington is a nightmare. And it's dangerous. It's totally unprotected. And it needs to be included in this. I don't know how that can be done. Is that possible to include that as well? That the ins and outs there on the cycle infrastructure can be included?
Yes, Councillor Kavanagh, we'll look at that from one end to the other, because really it probably doesn't make much sense just to have a bike lane between Elgin and Bank Street, because how do the cyclists get there and how do they leave? So that'll be done over the next few weeks in terms of what we can or can't do. Yeah, so we'll provide information, and we'll work with the ward councillor as well in terms of what that looks like to ensure that it meets her satisfaction in terms of the safety for cyclists to travel through that corridor.
Thank you. I mean, previously, before it was closed, it was impossible, practically impossible because of all the buses parked along there. I'm going to assume that parking will not be there anymore because that was actually the biggest hazard was the tourist buses parked along there. And I don't know where they are now, but that was a big hazard. So I'm hoping that will be gone. We talked a bit about the future plans and the possible tramway that would fit into future plans. That was a conversation that was quite lively a few years ago, and Vivi mentioned it, but where is that? Because we've got to keep that in mind. That could be a real game changer. Where is we at?
For the STO project, where we left at, council endorsed the under Spark Street Tunnel as the optimum corridor for them to use. That would free up, Wellington for other plans. But council also gave the STO wiggle room in case they did not get the funding to construct the tunnel into Sparks, that they can pursue Wellington as an option on the surface. And so their study, they're waiting for funding. They don't have the green light to proceed. They do have some funding to initiate or undertake for the last year or so, some technical work. But as far as we know, the commitment to proceed with a tramway from one end of Elmer all the way through and into Ottawa has not been funded, has not been confirmed on the federal side.
So those conversations are obviously ongoing while we're making these plans to reopen. We don't want to, I just want to get a feeling that, like we're not going to have to go backwards, that it's transportation planning, the service area that I'm responsible for is very much engaged on that and other projects in the downtown with the NCC. Okay, thank you. Over the holidays, I read a book, I'm just going to put it up, Street Fight, where they were putting up, this is what they did in New York City, where they were closing streets or revamping streets. And I can't help but feel inspired. And hopefully this is a good example. I highly recommend it. It's all about getting more cycle infrastructure in and more pedestrians. So I hope that this is this is the type of model we're looking at. It was recommended to me by some major urban planners. So that's really important to me because this was a weird opportunity. I mean, nobody saw this coming, that we would get an opportunity to close this road. I don't think we would have had frankly, I don't think we would have had the courage to close it off otherwise. But I would hate to blow this opportunity to go back to status quo. That is something that I just can't see. It was not ideal. I'm hearing all the arguments, but there's an opportunity to improve things, and I hope that happens. Now, I've seen that the retracting bollards there, they exist on Parliament Hill, and they had their ups and downs with those. I don't know if that is being considered, those retractable bollards. They're right at the bottom of the hill for those of us who drive on the hill. That was the way in and out. Is that being seriously considered?
I think that would be something that would be looked at in the final plan. From a temporary perspective, we wouldn't consider that for the next year because of the cost and the construction. You have to basically rebuild that area. So I think that's more the final, whatever Wellington becomes. And that might be one of the options. I would assume that's one of the things they'll look at in terms of how to secure that area.
I would think that would be about what the feds pay for. If it did come to that, because if it's security, it's really security for them, because if it's part of their precinct. So I'm very interested in those conversations. Anyway, I want to thank Councillor Troster for all her work on this and making sure that the next steps are going to be better for pedestrian and cycle infrastructure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Devine, you're back on the board.
Thank you, Chair. So I just, I'm so, this is my first committee meeting ever, and I'm so grateful for what has been such a fantastic conversation. And I want to go back and walk away from this, from what I heard from the first the first non-delegate delegate, Derek Simpson, when you were talking about, hoping that the short-term plan supports a long-term vision. And I still do, and what Ben said about, we have a blank slate here. I'm definitely looking forward to a long-term vision. And part of that long-term vision includes supporting what Councillor Luloff was saying. Because I recognize what Councillor Luloff was saying is that as we anticipate the future of Wellington, I want to make sure that any infrastructural changes we put in place recognize, the high volume of people that will be entering and exiting the stadium, recognize the larger number of people I hope that will be entering and exiting the library. So I do see that as part of the long-term vision. But I just want to speak, a little bit also about the equating of the challenges that Sparks Street faces with the challenges that we wonder whether or not Wellington might face as well. And I very much appreciate the work that the Sparks Street BIA puts into, and that Ottawa Tourism puts into making Sparks Street what it can be. It faces challenges. Sparks Street is, I don't mean this in any disrespect, it's an artificially constructed thing that is the byproduct of urban planning and tourism and our best intentions. The allure of Wellington Street is the byproduct of it being the greatest symbol of our democracy. And that is an inherent value that Sparks Street can only wish it had, and it doesn't. Sparks Street doesn't have the view of Parliament that Wellington does. So I do fully believe that that they're seen as two separate beasts. And whereas I recognize the challenges that Sparks Street faces, and I so much appreciate everything that Sparks Street BIA does, I think that there's so much more potential in Wellington to overcome those same challenges. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. And I'm glad you chose our committee to be the first committee. So on the quality survey, I look forward to a 10 out of 10. And that being said, that being said, at this point, I'm going to get Councillor Troster to read the amendment to the motion that has been viewed by our wonderful staff. Councillor Troster.
Okay, and Phil, you can let me know if I think this is the final version. Be it further resolved that the reopening plan include a temporary protected bike lane with the use of flex posts to retain the cycling connections between temporary closures and reopenings, and to protect active transportation users from vehicular traffic.
Great. So mover of the motion, you're fine with that amendment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. So just before we go to vote, I'm just going to add a couple of quick words. First of all, we've had a really great discussion here today, and I want to thank our staff. It's been a lot of work to get to this point. So Vivi, Phil, and all your staff, thank you. I also want to make mention of the fact we've heard some things today. We are starting to see increased traffic, so there's some concern around that with Portage Bridge and some backups. We've been told, now people are being told to go through Quebec to be able to get to the other side of the city. So there's some traffic challenges, and we have to work on addressing those. We've also addressed the fact it's technically not even secure right now. It's Tetris blocks and cars are driving all over. And let's face it, it's not exactly a beautiful looking street at this point. That said, I think what we all agree on, something has to happen with that street. And what's been missing is our federal government partners to date. It's been crickets. If this is what it took to be able to energize that discussion and bring it back to the table, I'm certainly happy to do that. You can certainly see whether people are tweeting out photos of cakes or they're just making it part of the conversation. We finally got their attention. So we should be proud of that. So at this point, I'm going to ask our committee coordinator to call for a recorded vote.
Councillor Luloff?
Yes.
Councillor Dudas?
Yes.
Councillor Gower?
Yes.
Councillor Johnson?
Yes.
Councillor Devine?
Yes.
Councillor Bradley?
Yes.
Councillor Troster?
Yes.
Councillor DeRuse?
Yes.
Councillor DeRush?
Oui.
Councillor Lowe?
Yes.
Councillor Kitts?
Yes.
And Chair Tierney?
Yes.
12 yeas.
Thank you very much, everybody. Congratulations. On the next part of the agenda, we do have two inquiries. The first one is from Councillor Bradley. Councillor Bradley, do you wish to read your inquiry, please?
Sure, thank you very much. This one is around windrows. I'm sure we've all had lots of questions on this come in, so I thought it was time to have the conversation again. So snow windrows present an inconvenience to residents across the city and are particularly difficult for both seniors and people with disabilities to clear. While other Canadian municipalities have experimented with or are actively involved with windrow clearing programs, the City of Ottawa does not currently provide this service. Instead, the city has created both the SnowGo and SnowGo Assist programs that connect seniors and people with disabilities with reputable contractors and provides moderate financial assistance for those considered low income. While these programs are helpful, residents have been asking the city to consider a more robust windrow removal program. So I have two questions. So can staff provide a detailed overview of the uptake on both the SnowGo and SnowGo Assist program? This should include the volume of residents that take advantage of the program, the cost to administer the program, and the annual amount of subsidies provided to eligible residents. The second one's a bit more detailed. So can staff provide an estimated cost as well as resource requirement for the following scenarios? So the municipality clears windrows from driveways for seniors and those with disabilities. So 3 options: tax supported citywide, service provided to seniors and those with disability only, service provided to seniors and those with disability based upon a full cost user pay system, and service provided to seniors and those with disability based upon a partial cost recovery system. I know that this was looked at back, I think, in 2006, so it's been a bit of time. So just hoping to get some updated numbers for consideration at a future date.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Dudas?
Thank you, Chair. Please provide a comparison of the snow removal service standards for the City of Ottawa and other Canadian municipalities with comparable size and weather, including service response times, areas of responsibility, for example, sidewalks, private laneways, etc., associated bylaws, and the level of service for various classifications of roads.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So there's no other business today. Adjournment. Next meeting will take place February 23rd, 2023. Thank you very much for everyone's attention today.
Thanks, Chair.